In this episode, we're talking to Benjamin von Wong. Now, if you're a photographer or really any creative professional, it's likely you've seen Ben's work all over the place. Ben entered the industry as a photographer, but I don't think it's quite so simple just to put him into that bucket, as you're going to find out. He entered as a photographer and he became known for high production behind the scenes and really crazy portraits, and then moved into creating images that told a story, namely a story of environmentalism. His work is exceptional and it continues to expand across different mediums, including now dioramas. He's also a podcaster. Just all around, this is going to be an awesome episode, so let's go ahead and jump in. This is the TSS Podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. Dude, I am so glad to have you on the podcast. It's been a minute since we have talked. Now, I've already given you a little intro, so people have a glimpse into what it is to be Von Wong. But I listened to your podcast. It was dope.
Which one? Which episode?
I listened to...
Here comes the quiz.
It was the episode where you guys were discussing removing carbon and basically a business basically taking care of its own carbon.
Yeah, and Peter Daring.
Peter Daring, that's what it was. And it was fantastic. He is the CEO founder of Peak Design. Yeah.
He is. Yeah. They make some incredible products. I think what I really loved about his story, and it seems to be a recurrent trend, is how people find their way to impact, to making a difference in the world from really weird directions. I mean, he started off making a camera accessory, and a decade later, lo and behold, that's put him in the perfect position to create the now largest climate neutral certifying body in the world. And it's like, wait, those two things aren't even connected. But
it blew me away, but it also inspired me in a way because I do love photography. It's a passion of mine, but it's one of the things that I want to be doing. And so seeing Peter not only do that, where he kind of did something in the photography space and then completely diverted, was like, yes, we have to start believing that we're more than just the one thing, that there's so much more to our abilities. And it's funny because you see actors and celebrities, they do tons of things. They're business people, they're entrepreneurs. Some of them sing, they act, they do all sorts of stuff. But for some reason, I don't know, maybe I've just felt this personally, but if you're a creative professional, it's almost like you do one thing and one thing only. You only are allowed to speak on one thing. But that's also why I appreciate you, dude, because you're doing a lot.
I try to. I mean, I personally hate boxes. I think we tend to like to put people in boxes, but this is not even just from a societal level. This is on a platform, an algorithmic level. It's just what we tend towards. I think the world has sort of evolved into this follow culture where you're going to follow someone specifically not for who they are, but because of what they do. And so in a sense, you're subscribing to a person as a character, as a reality show that you would maybe watch unfold. And when you fall in love with a character on a show, they have to follow very specific tropes. They don't change, right? Like Homer Simpson could never be smart one day.
For sure.
Because then it wouldn't be the Simpsons anymore. And this is the same sort of thing that we see playing out on social media, and people tend to follow and unfollow people because they start seeing that this is actually a human being. They're not just churning out the kind of shit that, gets me excited. So
100%. And brother, you're coming in and out on the audio. It's getting a little bit quiet and then going loud. I think it might be because your angle on the mic.
Interesting. Give me a second.
There we go.
I can also
look at you. You got this.
I've turned off all the audio processing. So usually there's a noise gate that kicks in. So that might be kicking a little bit.
That's probably better. Yeah.
Do you want me to re-answer the question or?
No. It was okay. It was just coming in and out a little bit. So we're good to go. But that is a mighty fine dead cat. I was complimenting Ben on his dead cat before we started. That's the little fur ball that you see on the mic.
Question: what is that blue fuzz on the left?
Dude, you missed that piece.
What?
This?
Ben, talk to them about your foreground, bro.
So I've decided to put a little prism element in the foreground just so that I have, something interesting here. And there's
cool.
there's even a dedicated light source to create a little bit of a blur. And I think everyone who does their webcam setup, no one thinks of the foreground.
That was my favorite part. You were like, nobody thinks of the foreground. And I was like, damn it, he's right. I put a lot of time into what's back there, but I did not think about what's over there.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes a shot cinematic is the, foreground, middle ground, background, not just middle ground and background. Yeah.
Creates much more depth. Now, I don't know. I love this about you. And I what I mean is the diverse kind of understanding. You were an engineer before you became a photographer, right?
Yeah. My background is hard rock mining engineering.
Hard rock mining and engineering. Okay. I have many questions on that. And then at some point you decide to be the disgrace of your Asian parents and say, I'm going to be a photographer, which
something like that. I tricked them.
Wait, how did this go down?
I told them that I was going to get an MBA. And so to get my MBA, I was going to do my GMAT, but to study for my GMAT properly, I was just going to take a break from my job just for a couple of months. And, and it turns out I quit in December, and applications were really only starting in September. So I had time after completing my GMAT. And so I took that time and started traveling. But, things were working out. And there's a sense, I think you guys supported me at this time. I had just launched my a big Kickstarter campaign. I raised $12,500 to travel across Europe for a month. And I was like, there is momentum here. Like school will always be waiting.
It's true.
I gotta try this thing out. And it wasn't because I wanted to be a photographer. It was more like I wanted an excuse to travel and see the world. I wanted to see where photography would take me. Which I think is slightly different than wanting to become a photographer.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so interesting. And maybe you can, a lot of our listeners this is a broad audience podcast. So most of our listeners are not photographers. What you are to the photography industry is pretty damn well known. Everybody knows Benjamin von Wong. But can you go into that story just a little bit more? Like you started this Kickstarter to essentially get money to travel to create photographs, right?
Yeah, basically. I guess to give context, the kind of photos that I was creating at the time were a little on the crazier side, I suppose. There were not that many photographers sharing behind the scene videos that were higher quality, that were a little bit more bold, was not very common. And so I guess I made my name trying to light people on fire. I do these big fantastical medieval photo shoots. There's always an element of production to it. It'd be fashion in a place, and it'd be a crew and a bunch of people. We'd be trying out different special effects, whether it was liquid latex or flour that we would throw to create cool textures in the air, just like a smoke machine would, or light painting. And what I learned really early on in that phase of my career was that when you share people the techniques of how you get to whatever it is you're doing, and that final thing is cool, then what you're actually creating is the opportunity to set yourself up as a guide so that others can be the hero, right? Other people can step into that shoe and be like, hey, now I can learn how to do the thing too. And that video that you create that shows how you do it is actually something that a blog might want to pick up and talk about, because you're creating value for the readership of the people. Sure. You're also telling a story. You're not just saying, hey, look at me, I did something great, pay attention to me. Sure. You're flipping it around and you're saying, hey, look at something clever that you can also do. This is how you might do it. And oh, by the way, this is the guy you want to follow if you want to find more stuff like this, right? And I think that equation hasn't really changed today. People tend to want to follow people who provide value to them, whether that's even just aesthetic or otherwise.
Yeah. And so your brand kind of took off at that point, where you're creating these videos, these very high production videos that were, to be honest, super exciting. I mean, like you said, there was this element of production, lighting people on fire. There, you had specialists on set. There was that library shot. I think it was a library, something you did. There's incredible background and backdrop. And I was like, this is unreal. But there's this very entertaining, but also it was straight up edutainment. It was educational. entertainment. And you kind of blew up. And at some point, you sort of transitioned the content you were creating into portraits and photographs that kind of told an environmental story. So what was that transition?
Yeah. So now by that point, we're skipping a number of years, right? So I quit my day job in 2012.
Okay.
And it took me 3 years or so to figure out how I was going to earn money doing what I was doing. And it wasn't really clear, but
so
I kind of started off.
I mean, the videos that you were doing. So the early videos you're doing, you're not making any money. You're trying to monetize that side and figure out how to make money on that side.
No, I'm not really talking about video, the category. I'm talking about just how am I going to make whatever it is I'm doing sustainable? And there would be multiple revenue streams that would come in. And it's kind of interesting because in my earlier days, I created a lot more educational content that was specifically targeted towards photographers. And while photographers don't have a lot of money to hire other photographers, they're really interested in tutorials or entertainment or gear reviews or something along those lines. And because I was an earlier day influencer, I may not have had a lot of money, but what I had was a lot of attention. So I could get a lot of sponsorships from different companies who would provide me with various levels of equipment. I could speak at a conference and that would get me a free plane ticket. And with the free plane ticket, I could go and shoot something that I hadn't done before. And so while I didn't have access to capital, I had access to clout. And that social clout created the flywheel where I was capable of continuously creating and entertaining and building and growing and so forth. After realizing that the photography market was really small and that like you kind of cap out really quickly in terms of how much money you can pull from the industry, I wanted to expand into the regular marketplace. And that was, how might I create content that appeals to a broader public? Because if I can appeal to a broader public, then the bigger companies like the rest of the world may be interested in hiring me to commission me to do something big and crazy and a little bit ridiculous. And so I think being a commercial photographer was sort of that faraway goal. I didn't know how you became a commercial photographer. And I sort of stumbled upon it by mistake. I think it's a combination of hard work, a lot of luck in the right place at the right time. And essentially, when I became popular in 2012, 2013, 2014, that time frame, it was sort of the golden age of creating powerful viral internet videos. There was a formula to it that if you were able to create something that created a headline and you're able to get on one of the buzz feeds of the world, that sort of would create this cascade effect. And going viral at that time, if you got 1 million views or 2 million views, actually meant something. It meant like newspapers around the world were picking you up as this sort of fringe internet sensation. And I experienced that completely by mistake when I decided to tie a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck in Bali.
Yeah, that was insane.
And so this idea of like creating headlines around your images, if you don't make it easy for people to talk about what you do, no one's going to talk about it. So what is the email subject line that people are going to click on? What is the header that's going to make someone want to share? Was something that I kind of fell into. And because I was documenting my process already, that gave the story, it gave the backbone to a lot of the stuff that I was creating. And so through that vehicle and through that lens of marketing and content creation and doing crazy things, I was able to somehow ride this wave, not to the heights of like, I think I never reached crazy popularity, I think, but I was still able to create enough momentum for myself so that I was able to attract the attention of big companies that really wanted something weird, something different, something authentic, something that was, where you could see a fantasy come to life. And so after I accomplished that, we're talking 2015, I had a big major global campaign with Huawei, which is a cell phone company that isn't popular anymore.
But you did that fire concept with them. So that same concept that we'd kind of seen a little bit earlier and that you had touched on several times, this pyrotechnics, we then saw it brought to life through that Huawei campaign and photographing it with the actual cell phone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Using a prototype of their cell phone. And the amount of money you earn from a commercial shoot. I mean, just to give, I suppose, a barometer, every time someone licenses an image for a country, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. per license. And there are a lot of countries in the world that they may want to advertise in. And so this sort of gave me a window into what life as a commercial photographer might look like.
Yeah.
And I think while most people would run towards it, I thought it felt really boring.
Why
because,
is that?
Because it felt like, what do you do after one big project? You just do another big project to do what? To earn more money, to move more product off a shelf, to do the next big project. Like I think the challenge had been reached. Can I make a living as an artist? Am I good enough to make it? Yes. Okay, cool. And then once you start creating things that are popular and that go viral, you start asking yourself, well, what am I going to do with this visibility anyways? Like, I have the views, I've gotten more views, I can get more views, but what? But for what? But okay, for earning more money to do more projects, but really your projects aren't getting more creative. You're spending more time sitting in a meeting room talking to people. Your projects aren't getting more impactful necessarily. You're spending all your time talking to clients to just do a big thing that is really about spending a lot of money. So it didn't have a soul. Like, it was lacking a center. It was lacking heart.
I mean, you're under the age of 30 at that point. How old were you then?
Probably 26, 27. Wait, no, sorry. I think I was about 28.
Okay.
Something like that.
And it's safe to say that you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars off that Huawei campaign. And you're thinking, what is the purpose of all of it? Like this is a level of introspection at an age that I just don't, it's unheard of. I mean, there's not a lot of people that I can think of that are, usually if you're 28 and you have made that kind of money off of a thing, you're like, man, how far can I go with this? Until you're 40 years old. And then you're like, it'd be nice if I was working towards something bigger.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't feel like a big decision to me. The direction at which it came from, I suppose, was, when I looked back at the projects that I was most proud of at that time, it wasn't the Huawei shoot. I mean, that was the one I earned the most money, and I was on the most billboards, and I was playing in front of movies and before cinemas. But it was like, I don't know, that's not something I really posted about. It's not something I wanted to share. What I was a lot more excited about were the projects where you're able to make a difference in people's lives, right? It's receiving that piece of feedback where it's like, oh, thank you. Thanks to the work that you've created. So I have a story. Back when I did my first presentation in 2010, so I was still a hard rock mining engineer. I hadn't quit my day job yet. I was making these videos of me going around. I was going to do my first presentation to a local photo club. And I wrote on Facebook and I said, hey, if the work that I've created has helped or moved you in any way, shape, or form, could you please leave a comment? And most people were saying, thanks, I learned a bunch of photography tips. But there's this one guy that said, like, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your work. I am chronically ill and depressed. And thanks to discovering your work, it gave me a completely new way to see the world. And I wanted to become a photographer. I wanted to do what you were doing. And since then, I have become a locally known photographer, and this is Tyler Grace. And in what you're showing right now on screen is me actually going to surprise him for his 21st birthday.
And
it's like
awesome.
Oh, like, this is the power of the art that I'm creating. This is the kind of stuff that I want to do more of. Like, these are the kinds of lives I want to shift, and how can I do that, right? And so the question was like, it wasn't so much can my work move people, because I knew it could do that, because I had built a following and I had people kind of, inviting me to speak and so forth. And there was a whole inspirational slant to it. But it was, can I make the end result of what I create bigger and more meaningful? And at the time, my biggest success that was impact was making a video for a family of strangers. I received an email from them saying, like, hey, they had seen my work, it had gone viral. They were wondering if I could help them make a viral video for their daughter who's dying of a terminal degenerative brain disease.
I remember
and
that.
Yeah, so that's Saving Eliza. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to make videos because I'm a photographer, but if no one else volunteers, I'm free in a couple months and I'm happy to come over and shoot something. And so a couple months later, I reached out and I'm like, so did you guys find anyone? They're like, nope. I was like, okay. So I flew over, slept in their stofo for like 9 days, made a video, and it ended up raising $1 million in a month and $2 million over the course of the year. And now they're the thriving foundation inside of this thing. their daughter was one of the first people who received the first person to ever receive a clinical trial in that field of disease. And it's just like, oh, this is making a difference. This is contributing back to the world. I want to do more of that. And when I realized that making money was never going to scratch that itch, I actually almost quit photography because I was like, oh, this is a dead end. It's not going to get me where I want to go. So I started making documentary films. And I had this idea that if I made documentaries, maybe I could find worthy causes and just not even charge people, make these videos for free and just take a percentage of like the amount raised. And it would be like 1% or 5% or something like that. But after 6 months of doing that, I realized that I was just constantly surrounded by sadness. Like I was almost telling these sad, mopey stories all the time because that's what would work. Like the storytelling formula, right? The hero's journey. And it was just like, oh, this is not how I want to spend my life. This is way too depressing. And so then I started embarking on a journey to try to figure out how to combine the two. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, I can relate somewhat on a smaller scale to the commercial side. I remember several years back, it kind of fell into my lap. A couple different contracts. One was for Nissan, one was for Toyota. And I got a glimpse into advertising and commercial money. And it was a small glimpse. I think it was like a $20,000 one day kind of project type thing. And that's like the smallest budget that you would see on like a commercial gig. And this was for Nissan. And I remember finishing it and just feeling like kind of gross. Like, not in the sense like I did something wrong. It was just like I was selling first of all, their creative directors were so wildly crazy about making sure that this brand new Altima was never shown anywhere. Okay. We had an Altima that had not been released yet. It is the Nissan Altima. And it was a year that had not been released yet. And this thing was brought over as if it was freaking plutonium. Like you cannot. And I'm like, dude, this is an Altima. Nobody gives an F about an Altima. Not to mention whatever. But when the whole thing was all said and done and we had this commercial, I was like, I'm selling a product that I don't really care. I mean, it's a good car, but like, I don't really care about it. You're not going to get any thank yous from anybody. The CEO is not going to be like, oh, this is a great commercial. Like there was no meaning and purpose at the end of it. And I just felt empty. And I was like, I can't imagine making a career, no matter how much you're getting paid, of doing that thing over and over again. Granted, I'm just going to be 100% honest. If it was $250,000 from Huawei, I would take that check and cash it 10 times and go do it again. And like that might be worth selling out, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's because I didn't have many responsibilities. I had quit a job as an engineer because I didn't want to have a job. I wanted to have something I enjoyed doing. I wanted to have a life. And so I think I had learned that same lesson in a different way. And maybe it was a mistake. I don't know, but in
all seriousness, I very much respect your decision. But
yeah, well, I mean, you found your purpose through, shooting people and that human connection. Right. So, and it sort of similarly, I really get a kick out of doing something that has a depth to it. And my favorite parts, the favorite part of my projects is the co-creation process of sitting down and chatting with people and getting to know them and learning something that you didn't know even existed and, co-discovering something. I think interestingly enough, I think it's the ego and the slight megalomaniac inside of me that makes, let's say, something like weddings not fulfilling enough. Mm-hmm. But my girlfriend, as an example, just like you, shoots tons of weddings, or used to shoot a ton of weddings, and she just loves helping people. And that immediate sense of feedback is what makes the job so validating. When you've created memories that will last people a lifetime, that means something, right?
Yeah, and I think, a part of There's a lot of reasons why I think I gravitated towards wedding photography. One of them was I was in a very depressing, long marriage of my own. And it was like each wedding that I photographed gave me this high. Like it would almost be this is what love is kind of moment. And then to be able to have that feeling that your girlfriend describes of, you are creating images that are impactful to people, and you find out right away how impactful. So that's a very addicting feeling, along with that euphoric kind of high from the entire. Now, I would be in my car driving home and then realize it would be like this a super great high, and then driving home I'd realize that's not what I have, and I would get depressed after every single shoot. But that was one of the things that kind of drew me into that, was kind of what was going on in my home life, the family, and the thing that I envisioned. I wouldn't discover that for many, many years, but it gave a lot of meaning and purpose to, specifically documenting weddings. But I know a lot of people that don't find any purpose or any significance in that. So it's very interesting. Every one of these genres.
That's why you're a better photographer than those other people. Because you cared.
In that
You're
arena.
like, I'm crying more than the other guests here. This is amazing. I got to capture it.
That was every single time. Anthony, why don't you pull up? I want to give our audience a little sense of kind of your work and body of work. I want to show some of Ben's just fantastical images. They're wild, dude. I mean, these are incredibly well conceptualized. They are difficult to pull off, and they're done very well. And this is your later body of work that has that environmental purpose to it. Keep scrolling a little bit. I wonder if we can get to, there's the shipwreck.
Well, I have a question real quick. Which one of these, was it the laptop or the bottom one that was in McKinney, Texas?
The laptop shots.
I almost went to that one, but I got diverted. I was there in the same city as you. I remember I joined the group, but anyways.
Full disclosure, I'm gonna totally call out Anthony on this, but Anthony goes, "Who's our next guest today?" And I go, "Ben Von Wong," and he goes, "What? No way!" And I was like,
I was very excited for this.
And he's like, "This is gonna be the greatest thing ever." So you've got a fanboy over here in our editor.
I hope you still feel the same by the end of the conversation.
I'm sure he'll feel even more so.
I was gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. I'm like, they say never meet your heroes.
The work that you have been creating was incredible. I mean, so much so that I told you, I think between this conversation and our last one, you'd mentioned something like, you're going to be on a podcast with Pi to your girlfriend. Your girl was like, oh my gosh, say hi to Pi. And you said,
she's like, I love him. His work's great. I love his framework. He makes the best guides.
And my response to you was, now you know how I felt for like about the past 5 years, because while you were doing every one of these projects, and just, while I operate several different things, but one of them being an editorial magazine for photographers, I would get nonstop messages of like, hey, have you seen Von Wong's latest shoot? Hey, did you get that? And I'm like, dude, if Ben doesn't send it to me directly, 100 people before you have said, sent it. Like, it was nonstop. And we featured each one of these. There's the Huawei campaign. But it was more than impressive, Ben. And this isn't like me fanboying. It's the honest truth that it's more than impressive to see the impact you had on the industry in such a short period of time. I don't know that I've seen anybody do that in a 2-3 year span.
I don't know. I mean, they're the new age folks. Like, they're like, is Peter McKinnon new? I mean, he's kind of old by now, but still, like he's the polished generation of YouTubers, like the YouTube rock stars, and then they're the whole slew of Instagram rock stars that have come out that all happened just a little past me. And it's so funny because like the generation right before me was sort of Chase Jarvis, Zach Arias, David Hobby. Those are the people I learned from, whose styles were a lot more classical, but still at the time, what they were doing was amazing because no one was sharing this stuff. So,
yeah,
am I a product of the exact moment in time where I started, or am I truly different and unique? Like, I don't know. I do acknowledge that I'm a little bit on the weirder side of things, though. But
I think you're a mixture, right? We're all kind of this product of what's around us, but we're also our own person. But what's unique is, yes, we have the Peter McKinnons, and we have there's a lot of really great YouTubers, Daniel Schiffer and all these people that are out. But I have not seen, and you're a humble person, you're not going to acknowledge this, but I haven't seen somebody catch just nonstop headlines for years having just entered the industry, that is a very unusual thing. Like Peter puts out great content, but you're not seeing just headlines all over the place about what he's doing. And so what you were doing was so unique. And then especially once you gave it that environmental twist, then it was like on a next level. And I could see your own kind of personal interest in wanting to make your work more meaningful. I think you probably, like you said, you got to a point, I would imagine you got to a point where it's like, I just did an underwater shoot. This was crazy. This was ridiculous. We got all these images out of it, but for what? And I can imagine that you were kind of thinking like, what is the next step there?
Yeah. I mean, the world, as we kind of opened up this conversation with, the world has a tendency to want to put you in a box. And so I do fire photos and suddenly I'd be the fire photographer. And then I do some things off a rooftop and then be the rooftop photographer. And then I'd, now today I'm like, oh, I'm the plastic photographer or the trash photographer. It's like, I don't know. People just have this tendency of wanting you to redo the same thing over and over and over again. And some people do that and it's wonderful, but it just was not really for me. So the desire to grow and shift and change and adapt and find meaning and find purpose, but to continuously think about like, well, why are you creating this? And if you're going to do it, you might as well try to get it seen by people, because I think especially now in my later days, I see art as a tool, right? Like, if I'm going to be creating something that's like the most extraordinary thing in the world, but no one's going to see it and it's not going to make a difference, then why put the time, energy, and effort to do it? Like my need for expression isn't so great.
Yeah.
But I think this might come from a place of a certain amount of privilege. I mean, I have the privilege to choose what I want, but I think it's that selectiveness that gives the ability to create work that is truly different. Because if you're, regardless of how talented you are, if you're creating something new every single day or every single week, week after week, like when are you going to have the time to create something magnificent and something bigger, something that will land, that people can appreciate? And I think that the ecosystem has changed where the people who are spending time and energy to create really large, big, complex stuff are not rewarded anymore because there's no incentive to do it. The half-life of a piece of content is going down over time. The value of an individual photograph, but even a single project, is going down over time. I remember the days where maybe even just 3-4 years ago, if Apple made an ad, everyone saw that ad because they'd air it in all the right places and they'd do something really clever and there'd be a great story behind it. I can't remember the last Apple advertisement for whichever new product that they came up with, no matter how many millions they poured into it. And there's this, I think, this effect of being in silos and just wanting people to stick to their lane and fit in their buckets and just cycle through things over and over. And it's not about how cool something is and how much it moves you. It's how long you just sit mindlessly going to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So,
well, it's getting,
I rambled over here.
No, it's getting worse. And one of the things that you said was like, we can almost see this, like the half-life of a piece of content, right? So if you are a creator, if you're an artist, if you're a cinematographer, if you are an online educator, whatever it is that you do, the half-life or the duration that thing is actually being viewed is so incredibly short. I mean, 5 years ago, you could capture, multiple sites and papers and magazines for a good several days. Your stuff would be circulating. Now it feels like you get 15 minutes on a website and then it's already buried. Like it's buried so quick just because of the volume of content being put out nonstop. So that on top of the fact, and I would imagine that is having a very adverse effect on overall budgets. I mean, what's the point of paying the money and having the budget if things are being viewed for such short durations? Would you not agree with that piece? I think you actually mentioned that, like there was the money was dwindling in this side.
Yeah. I mean, that you couldn't be more right. I mean, it's the reason why I started shifting towards creating art installations. There was this realization that, I need to go into an industry that is growing, not an industry that's shrinking. And the experiential market pre-COVID was doing it was a rocket launcher. This what everyone was talking about, because it was all about what experiences are you going to create that are authentic and real and local,
what is this
localized.
Experiential market? Tell me more about that. What is that?
You go to a trade show, you attend an event, you go to a concert. There's a thing that ideally you're going to photograph yourself in front of to talk about where you're at and what you're doing and why it's important to you. And so I was, toying with that market space. But to go to this concept of short half-life, if I can make a case for doing work that is meaningful beyond the morality of it or the need for it, it is that when you create something that is addressing a problem that people are going to continuously have, that means that your work is going to consistently resurface. And so the work that I created around plastics keeps resurfacing. I mean, these are 3-4 year old shoots that come up. Like my mermaid series I shot in 2016. And this year it came out on a stamp by the United Nations because they discovered my work, because, they typed ocean plastic art or artist, and there are not that many people who have done it. And so when you do something that is meaningful and you do something well, and you do something that resonates and sticks in people's hearts and minds, right? I think there's still value to that, right? We talk about all the A/B testing, and you're never going to be able to outcompete that. However, I think the ultimate goal of all of these brands and these campaigns is to own a piece of someone's heart. It's not just to optimize a click-through rate. But the budgets are being slashed because we're now comparing quantitative versus qualitative, and we know stories work. We know narratives, like strong narratives, make a difference, but we can't measure it, and so we don't invest our time and money in that unless we have copious amounts of it. So, so that isn't to say there isn't. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of value in creating this stuff. Whether other people are measuring it or investing in it is a completely different story, and so that's the game and the nuance that you kind of need to tread as a creative these days, that I think is quite challenging.
That's so interesting. So given that, how have things changed, throughout 2020 on this side? I mean, if you're in the experiential side, and obviously experiences are shut down and advertising budgets, I would imagine advertising budgets and commercial budgets are being slashed through 2022. What has this year been like?
Yeah, this year's been great. I mean, the best year of my life now. No, seriously, it hasn't been a bad year. I think from a career perspective, every single job, speaking engagement, and anything I had on the plate was wiped off the face of the earth. But I'm healthy and I have shelter, and yeah, but it's fine, right? I think one way to phrase this is that I'm not successful enough to have any responsibilities, right? So I don't have a company that can go bankrupt. I don't have employees that depend on me. I don't have a supply chain. I am not successful enough to be tremendously affected by this, but I'm also not unsuccessful enough to really be affected by this. So I can basically float through this on my Maslow's hierarchy of needs perfectly fine, except my existentialism is like in crisis mode. So
what have you been turning? So I imagine what I'm getting from this is you haven't been essentially doing much work this year, which makes sense because I don't think a lot of people have been doing much work this year, especially if you're on the photography side. Is that what you're saying in a nutshell?
Well, it depends how you quantify work. If you mean work as in things that you get paid to do versus things that you feel like you're making progress in your life and your career as an entrepreneur, they're kind of different things. So
this is the Stupid Simple podcast, bro. Let's break it down.
So the way I like to describe the beginning of my 2020. So I guess in March here, when things started to get really serious, is that I was trying to run a marathon in a rocking chair. So I was moving a lot. I wasn't getting very far. And
analogy.
And so when you say like, well, were you working? Or like, I guess you didn't have any work. It's not really true. I was so busy. I was so busy not getting anywhere. But that didn't change the fact that I wasn't busy. I think for me, I learned
busy with, like, give me an idea of what this is.
Well, I launched my own podcast called Impact Everywhere. It explores positive impact in unexpected places. And I, never done podcasting. So I had to learn buy new gear, learn how to do it, learn how to edit it. and so that was like a really fun adventure. And then along the way, I discovered that I needed to make all this different art. So then I started making these custom paper cut art pieces for about 20 episodes to promote the podcast.
I've seen those on your Instagram. That's how you are.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's Impact Everywhere. And
so you can see I got lazy, right? You can see that the art started disappearing. But if you keep scrolling down, I think you might need to load the medium page. But there used to be a moment in time where I was making a lot of art, but I would spend 2 days out of my week making the art for the podcast.
No, that's what I saw on your Instagram. And I was like, it looks like each of these are custom made pieces that go with the episode.
Yeah. And they were made of paper. So layered paper cut pieces of art.
Go to any of those. Actually go to his Instagram, because his Instagram actually shows all of them. Pull up Ben's, I was sitting there looking at this and I'm like, I don't know how many people Ben's interviewing, but I don't know how this is going to be sustainable.
I was getting a little tired at the end of it.
Beautiful, dude. Like, this is so ridiculous. This is all paper art.
Yeah. Just layers of paper, one layer at a time, stacked on top of each other. And I was figuring out how to do this at the same time. I volunteered at a couple different organizations. One of them was called getusppe.org. And I was volunteering as a creative director to help them. I had launched my own.
Did you, not you, Ben, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you get this whole idea from, I remember you doing, I think it was with your sister for her maternity. It was that ski photograph. Did you get this concept from that? Like, were you like, I'm just going to take this and run with this?
No, this was like, my mom literally told me I had to take maternity photos for my sister, because obviously I'm the photographer of the family.
She made you.
But, well, she just asked if I could. And I was like, but then, everyone's doing maternity photos. And my sister also is not really lovey-dovey with her husband. And so they were looking for something fun and weird to do. And so, we came up with this idea of doing these miniatures instead, and created worlds out of fruits and vegetables. And so I think that was like my dive into little miniature worlds for a little while. And for me, the challenge that I wanted to give myself was, hey, TikTok's blowing up. Could I go viral on TikTok? Can I gamify the system? I want to know if I still have it. So I learn all about the successful TikToks and, what seems to work with different TikToks, and launch this thing. Gets, 4.6 million views. I go from 0 to 100,000 followers. And now ridiculous. I'm like theoretically a TikTok influencer, but I refuse to post more things because I'm like, well, I don't need more followers. That's not the point. Yeah. So that was another random project that I did during COVID. And
what would
just
you,
the continued.
So what you just said for a whole number of people is going to sound so incredibly fantastical. I posted one video, got 4.6 million views, and then I had 100,000 followers. So why don't we break that down for 1 second? Because despite you not wanting to do any more TikToks, I bet a bajillion people want to know what you discovered. So what did you when you did all that studying, what did you feel like was the formula? What was the framework to get something to go viral on TikTok?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the feeling of awe, like that's cute, that's like so relatability. Mm-hmm. It needs to start with relatability, but it needs to lead into a cliffhanger. Within the first 3 seconds, we need to know something is a little off here, and it's going to be worth my time. Okay. I think this is kind of true of every platform, but with TikTok especially, I think it's heightened emotions, and heightened emotions skewing towards the positive. And things that relate around my mom. This happened to me today at work. This happened on my way to school. Like the everyday randomness that just may happen, or like, oh, look here, this everyday normal thing is just about to get wild, right? Mm-hmm. And the more emotions you can stack of surprise, of wait a minute, of oh my gosh, this kind of feels like it could happen to me. The more of those you can stack, the better. The rapid cuts are really important, but I think most important is the pacing of the voice. So I recorded a voiceover, which was just talking about how to, this is my mom, da 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 da. And combining voice with text, because even though it's an audio platform, you still need the supporting text to kind of add contextual elements to the whole thing. So I don't know. I just layered all of these little practices in. I shot everything on an Insta360 Go. It's tiny. It's like this big. It's as big as your finger for those who are listening. And I just wore
Ben's account right here. Von Wong.
Yeah. So yeah, I talked to a bunch of different TikTok friends, and they said, if you have a new account and you want to go viral, just keep posting and reposting the same thing if you think it's the right video until it hits.
Mm-hmm.
And once it hits, you have to comment on every single comment. So there's like little strategic things, and there's greater storytelling things. And so I just did my homework the same way I think anyone does their homework, and put all my eggs into creating very few powerful videos, as opposed to creating a video a day every day, trying to like build a following. Da 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 da.
Interesting. Well, it clearly worked in getting you to that place, and I would say that's been so. I did TikTok too I think I started in June, but I did the exact same thing. Was I kind of researched like what are the people that are doing well on this platform and what are they creating, and then I came up with my own little formula for it, which was almost exactly that. I need to show them, where you are now, where you're going to be, make this highly relatable, and all within the first like 5 seconds. And then we go into the actual content and make them, and it worked. But it's an interesting one because I feel like it kind of took the lessons that I'd learned from other platforms and focused them down. So like after doing TikTok, I almost feel like I can go back to YouTube. I can go back to the other platforms and be better at it. I almost feel like I became better at it's not even about the other platforms. I became better at refining and clarifying a message through practicing over and over, making a 30-second piece of education.
I mean, they say that what is the thing? I wanted to give a shorter talk, but I didn't have the time.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to condense value into a smaller package. And so if you get really good at condensing things, and you already have the technical background, so if you're shooting well, it's in focus, like you can sustain a clean shot, and then you transport that ability to hold attention into a longer platform, and you don't significantly lose quality along the way, then I think you're golden. I think if you do it the other way, though, it's a little hard. But if you're used to making really short TikTok videos, but you never did the homework for actually how to shoot long form, there's no way the quality of your shots will actually hold someone's attention for 10 minutes. If it's like shaky and confusing and stuff, it doesn't only work one way. So I do think
that's a good point. It doesn't necessarily translate the other way around.
Yeah.
Wow, never thought about it from that standpoint.
Everything is useful, right? Like you learn a skill in one place. It's never going to perfectly transpose on, but you're going to pick up just enough elements so that it still makes sense as you move the other way.
Well, you're 100% right, and I never thought about it from that standpoint. But if you had a TikTok video that went on for 15 minutes, you would want to throw your phone off a bridge. Like that would be the most obnoxious thing in the world. Like to see the hard cuts, to see the shaky footage, to see just the format in and of itself. So it's a really good point that I actually had never thought about. So the artwork, and Anthony, pull up his artwork again, because I just can't get enough of it. So the paper art that you're doing now, so basically you pair one of these with the episode that goes up, but what happens after? I mean, these are freaking gorgeous, dude.
Yeah. So all that marketing advice that I was giving you, I don't apply to my podcast. And there's a couple reasons for it. The primary reason is that when I started the podcast, I wanted to make it about things that I was interested in, and I wanted to learn, and I wanted to enjoy the process. So a lot of creativity has shifted from process to output. It's all about what are you going to post, and how are people going to resonate with it? And so you end up just creating constantly for others. But so much of the joy of creating comes from the process of problem solving, of discovery, of learning, of exploring. And I think this could be the same in a relationship, right? Like
sure.
The the sex isn't about the climax, or the the relationship isn't about the marriage. It's not about the apex, little tiny piece of the puzzle that everyone else sees. It's everything else that makes the thing special. And I had, over time sort of felt increasingly, especially as the volume of content that I create has gone down, the joy of creating has sort of disappeared. And because I keep tackling things I've never done before, they're always very tiring and very exhausting and very complex, and they're always problem solving. And so I think I just wanted something that I could enjoy and dive into, and yes, market at a minimum, but not market beyond that. And the dioramas, the little paper cutouts, I think there was a practical vision to it too. It's like, those things right now are about a foot tall, but there's no reason why they couldn't be 3 stories tall. So I just acquired a new skill, which is, building layered art installations that could actually look really cool if I ever made it really big. It could be a collaborative piece in the future. Who knows? So it was all about just reclaiming control of more of my own creativity, because at the end of the day, I'm a collaborator. And if I don't have people to collaborate with, I'm not doing anything. I'm just talking, and it's a little tough.
I gotta say, dude, I love the way that you think. And I'm trying to, when you look at this stuff, I'm hoping that I'm going to unpack this for you for just a second, because you were a engineer, hard rock mineral engineer, who seamlessly transposed their skill set into photography, then adapted that photography to multiple different genres, did incredibly well in those, then did commercial work, and now is doing dioramas. And those dioramas you're not joking around, dude. Anthony, pull those freaking things up. You can just leave them on the screen, man. Why you got to be so stingy with the dioramas, man? Look at this. Click into one of those. This looks like... I
can find it somewhere else. Instagram. No one's logged in, so
nobody's logged in, so
is there a different website I could pull these up on?
Can we pull these up larger on your website, Ben?
I'm trying to think of no. See, I didn't even bother promoting them on my website.
You know what? That's fine.
I can give you a Dropbox link.
There we go. No, we got it. Look at it. The detail in this is mind, for Will Ferrell's terms, mind-boggling. This is mind-boggling. It's nuts, dude. Like, this looks like the work of somebody that's been doing this for 10 years. And so I would like to just stop for a minute to say that it's highly unusual. And I am curious what has enabled you to move from each of these arenas so seamlessly, and to be able to create artwork that looks like you've been doing it for years.
I wish I shared the admiration you have for me with myself.
That's ridiculous.
I think it's a lot easier to look in from the outside and see the final result, the pizza, if you will, that didn't just struggle to figure out what to buy at the supermarket. Like, I spend so much time walking in the wrong direction, coming up with terrible ideas, doing things that never see the light of day, that when you're living it, you're just like, man, like, when I look back on this year, I don't feel like I have seized the opportunity as much as I could potentially have had I made different decisions. Does that mean I did a bad job? No, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to life. You can go in any direction, and that terrible decision will have a lesson in it hidden somewhere that you will make that will be useful 10 years from now, and it might be critical to some future success, as it often is. But yeah, I have the word seamless, that just doesn't feel like me. I think I just trip, fall, shove my way out, but I do it really loudly. And it turns out people only remember the things that resonate with them. They completely forget about everything else. So, there are these projects that you probably have in mind when you think Von Wong, and there are others that you'd be looking at and you're like, oh, did he do that? Oh, okay, maybe, but not. And so So I think the internet is this weird place. It just really forces a spotlight on in a pretty special way, where people see you in your best or your worst light.
Well, so I mean, I know what you're saying, and you're saying from what I gather is that it's a lot of failed attempts and it's a lot of trial and error. And what's impressive to me is I get that. I mean, in my opinion, a person's talent can only ever be so much. It takes talent along with that hard work, and eventually you develop a skill. And that skill, you know, like to me, creativity is a skill. To me, it's something that is developed over time. It's muscle memory. It's all those things. It's all that practice. And maybe talent makes up, you know, an added whatever percent, you know, genetic talent. But I truly don't believe that genetic talent is the thing that makes people successful. But what I'm saying here is that your speed of iteration is incredibly fast. Like the process of you failing, getting up, trying again, failing, getting up, trying again, and iterating your way into a final product is faster than most people that I would think of in any creative field. And I think that's worth taking a step back. And I do think, my friend, you need to exercise a little bit more self-love. You need to love yourself a little more.
Yeah, no, maybe. I mean, my roommate had this amazing saying, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone. It's meant in sort of a joke, but she's like, Ben, you really need to gain the confidence of a mediocre white man. And what she means by that is just like,
I couldn't agree with that more.
Just like, I think like immigrants or children of immigrants, especially minorities, just have this culture of beating themselves down, right? I need to work harder. I need to be better. I need to be faster. I need to do things better.
Comes from the time
but like
we're young.
The mediocre white
man,
and specifically the mediocre white man, the person who isn't smart enough to know that they're not smart. Like anyone in the beginning of their career, right? Like the photographers with the biggest watermarks because they're so scared people are going to steal their photos are the worst photographers.
For sure.
Like all the time.
For sure.
And so this confidence of the mediocre white man is something I try to cultivate, but I just can't. And I don't know why. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like something very aspirational to strive for, I guess.
Well, I will say, and this is a place to agree to disagree and to have offensive opinions. It's okay. We can all be friends. We're all going through this process of learning and figuring out this mess together. I don't understand why we have to pretend like everything is all rainbows, like on Instagram. But
yeah. But I mean, let's look at it. I've been doing photography since November 2007. That was the first day I bought a camera. And so I'm old. Or we're getting old together, dude. And like, I think sometimes you forget that it's been over a decade that I've been creating stuff. And so I hope that in a decade, I've created at least something that someone can swipe for like, 60 seconds for on my Instagram profile and keep them entertained for 60 seconds, right? You would hope to, at the very least, be able to produce work that can captivate people for 60 seconds in 10 years. And I think I've kind of done that. So the bar for success, if it was just that, feels really low. Like it just doesn't feel like enough. And I think for me, the big question that I've been asking myself, and the one that I've been eternally frustrated with, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is, how might I create work that is more efficient? And efficient, the word specifically is, I see art as a tool. So I create art in order to hopefully push for social change in some capacity. But the art I create, let's say I do 2 projects a year, 2 major projects. I take, pour heart, soul, time, money, everything, effort, energy, and I pour all this time, energy, and effort. Is it effective? Is it efficient? I know it's effective because I see, through conversations with people, I see how it spreads. I know it's effective work, but is it efficient? And how can I increase my efficiency? And how can I continue to innovate and stay relevant? Because I think that's something that's also continuously breathing down your throat as an independent creative. And I think efficiency really plays a role in that. And I'd love to know. So that's what haunts me. right?
Well, so usually you want
year
to
after year.
usually you want to increase efficiency because you want to increase output. Are you saying that you want to increase your output? You want to do more?
I want to increase outcomes. And so there's a difference between output and outcome, right? And output is how much content I've created. Outcomes is how many lives have I changed, right?
Okay.
I care about outcomes. And I actually think the success of projects should be measured around outcomes and not outputs. I think we have the wrong KPIs, that with the wrong algorithms celebrating the wrong things. And I think this is true of life. I think this is true of society. The most important things can't be measured. Yeah, the most important things can't be measured. If you tried to measure the quality of your relationship based on how many hours of eye contact you had with your partner per day, it'd be the total wrong metric.
I like that. You know what's interesting though is like the first time that I ever received like congratulatory messages on like social media, congratulations on your success, was when I passed 500,000 people following me on TikTok. And I now have 850,000 on there. And what I get most now are messages on congratulations on your success. And I'm like, what are people's like KPIs? These performance indicators is the number of likes and followers that you have versus like, man, I've built a business that sustains 30 plus people, that gives them money, income, homes, their families are fed. But the first time that I get congratulated for my success is when I reach a certain number of followers online. So I could not agree with you more on that subject of, yes, we are all sorts of ass backwards in terms of performance indicators. But what I'm getting from what you're saying is that you want to increase efficiency while at the same time keeping your level of impact. Like you want to have the same outcomes, same. No.
I want to have more impact with less effort.
More impact.
No. Wait. More impact, less effort.
More impact.
If I can impact more people more regularly, more effectively, more efficiently, right? I want all the mores. Basically, I'm not satisfied with anything. and this may be actually like one of those tragic Greek flaws, that they sing about in ballads where the guy goes and dies miserably. I struggle. I rationalize this in my head a lot. Like, is it ego? Is it truly the desire to make the world a better place? Really, it doesn't matter where it comes from as long as people are benefiting from it. So I agree. I can bear that burden, and the rest doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter. If I were to approach that, so here's what I would do is I would put everything that you do into a framework. So having a framework that's literally, step A all the way through to step Z to get to the place that you want to go. And then next to each of these letters, next to each of these steps along the way, I would then mark that item as like, is this, special sauce? Is this one of the things that I need to be touching? Is this is this the Von Wong factor? Or is this just something that anybody competent can handle? And with all the items that are anybody competent can handle, you find that person, that anybody competent to fill in those roles, and you retain the special sauce. So that's the step one easiest way of, for me, increasing output as well as outcomes, as well as everything, is getting all the stuff that's, like there has to be tons of producing things and things that you're doing for everything that you do that can be handled by somebody else just to free up your time. Now, if you start ending up with like tons of special sauce components that you have to have your hands in, then I don't think you can really, you get to the point where you're like Ron Howard. Ron Howard has to have his hands in a film. And this is what prevents Ron Howard from doing more than a film every 1 or 2 years. You know what I mean? Like there's only a certain amount that you can potentially touch if everything is your special sauce.
Is this a service you're offering? Because I want to sign up.
I'm busy. Great. I'm busy making my own frameworks, dude.
Well, this is the thing. I need someone to hold my hand. There are some things I like to do alone, but it's it's so much easier to give other people advice and so much harder to follow it yourself, kind of a thing. So that's why you need someone to help you through it. So let me know when you change business models. Next pivot, sign me up.
I mean,
I'll be a guinea pig.
This whole platform is a place for developing frameworks, and the next one is on relationships and whatnot. But that's the only way that. But here's the thing: is that while I'm good at taking a process and breaking it down into something that people can follow and that they can replicate, I absolutely hate managing that process. Like once I have the framework down, once I have like done the education, done everything, like I don't want to touch it again. And so that's where my business partner comes in, because he's the CEO of our company. So he'll take these frameworks and then he's the one that manages the day-to-day of those businesses. Like he puts the right pieces in the right place and runs with it. But I hate doing it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's that old African proverb? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm pretty good at going fast. I think maybe that's to answer your previous question, where I'm constantly pivoting. I'm constantly changing my mind. I'm constantly falling in love with some other thing and trying it out and failing or not failing and succeeding and then going in the other direction. So I think I've done a very good job of just trying things and not being consistent, which is really bad for paying salaries. I don't recommend it. Terrible strategy.
The funny thing, I had another conversation actually just today, and we were talking about what is it that makes it, you look at like, let's say like within the Japanese culture, there was actually a movie that I saw on this called Ramen. And that the first thing, when he mentioned it, the first thing I thought was ramen. It was this movie where, and ramen, the like Taiwanese, like, okay. So, a lot of the people that make ramen or ramen, they've been doing this generationally. I mean, they've been doing it 20, 30, 40 years. The best places, they've been doing it for so long. And it's people that are just passionate about the craft to the core, and they really don't care about like doing other things, doing different things or anything else. They're just dialed in. You are not that way. And I am not that way. And why do you think that is?
Because we weren't born that way. I don't know. The world needs lots of different people.
I agree. But I've always wondered, like when I was in accounting, I so much wanted to enjoy the work that I was doing. I was a religious person at the time. I would pray about it. I would, please God, help me to be just help me to enjoy accounting and nothing else. I just want to not hate what I'm doing, but I hate this. Just help me to enjoy this. I don't care. I'll do this the rest of my life. I hated it. And it clearly didn't work. 2 years later, I quit and did photography. And even in the photography space, once I accomplished the things that I wanted to do in that space, it's not that I'm the greatest photographer in the world. There's tons of incredible photographers. But in this space, I feel like I've done the things that I want to do. I want to continue educating. I want to continue doing these things. But when I get to that place, I get this itch, this like little nagging, monkey on my shoulders that's like, hey, it's time to do something else, stupid.
I wonder if it's the efficiency thing that comes back. And so, it takes phenomenally little effort to become a decent photographer. I mean, you can be a decent photographer in a couple of years. And so if you draw the bell curve of mastery out, the first couple of years is when you're experiencing phenomenal growth.
For sure.
I mean, your 80-20 rule right there. 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the way there. And then from that point forward, it's like, it's downhill, man. You can spend 10 years getting 1% better. And it's like, well, why do I want to be 1% better when I could try something brand new and combine it together and have idea babies and bring something into the world that hasn't been seen before and see how I can jump from this mountaintop to the next mountaintop. And I may not be on the tallest mountaintop, but I could probably create something that hasn't been seen before. And I think that's where the source of innovation comes from. It's definitely not where mastery comes from, but I think it's where innovation comes from.
So I'm curious, because I feel like your ramen or my ramen, it's that thing that ties specifically to a core value that you have, a core value that you have for yourself that basically dictates most everything that you do. And if you line up what that core value is with that thing that you're doing, then I feel like that is the thing that you can literally do forever. So in talking with you, I'm very curious as to like the background, the values that you might have, because what I hear is impact. You've done things for, environmental impact. You've done things that have been impactful of other people's lives, but what is the core value of yours that is driving that?
Yeah. It's interesting. I gave this quite a little bit of thought over the pandemic, one of the gems. And one insight that I had was when talking with a friend is that when we pursue success, or what we think is success, we're not actually pursuing success, the definition of success, because it means very many different things to very many different people. We are pursuing a feeling of success. And so more importantly is, how do you want to feel vis-a-vis the relationship that you have with your work and your life, and how those balance themselves out, or how those are integrated together. And for me, I landed upon four core feelings that I would like to feel when I am like that give me the feeling of success. The first was a sense of agency, right? To have the choice to decide, do I want to do something? Do I not want to do something? Do I want to accept this project? Do I not want to accept this project? Do I have to be here right now having this conversation? Am I choosing to be here and having this conversation? Yes, great, sure. I'm happy, right? The second was tribe, or just a sense of community. I think it's really important for me to be in a position where I can help others, but also be helped, right? That mutual exchange of value is something that's really interesting. And even more interesting to me when I'm surrounded by other people who are having an impact and making a difference, and who are sort of A-listers in whatever it is that they're dealing with, and whichever field that they're trying to make an impact in. It doesn't really matter, but that sense of community and tribe and belonging and exchange of value is really important to me. The third is a feeling of alignment. And so this is a feeling that I am at the right place at the right time with the right skills, doing the right thing. And I think for me, this year has been really hard on the alignment front, because I feel like I'm like the world's best VCR maker right now, but no one cares about VCR players. And so my skills are like, I need to find these oblique ways of transposing my VCR player skills into something else.
And by VCR player skills, you mean these big production shoots, basically.
Yeah, this like pretty photo thingy that I do. But there are components of it that are useful, right? So even if you were making a VCR player, like you understand the way maybe electronics work, and all things still run in the same logic sequence, right? So my ability to tell stories and to translate storytelling between worlds is still intrinsically valuable, but it requires a lot more work to see it and to feel it and to understand it and to know how it all plays out. And then the fourth and the last piece of feeling that is important to me, and it's mostly ego, is feeling essential. I'd like to feel important. I like to feel that no one else in the world could do this. I like to feel that by getting involved in something, I can play the role of an inflection point. And so that, once again, that question that exercise that you gave about the framework, it's like, what is the one thing that you can do that no one else can do? And if I'm doing that thing, then I feel like my time is valuable. So these are like the four attributes, and the exercise to find your own is remarkably simple. It's just, take an hour or an hour and a half and make an exhaustive list of every single emotion you want to feel successful, and write them all down. And then you group them together, and you'll notice there are a lot of similarities and what are like the overriding themes. And then you can break those down into affirmations that you could repeat to yourself every single day. But I think the exercise of understanding what makes you tick, and why do you go to work every day, and why do you wake up, and why do you work hard, and why do you want what do you want? Understanding that is super interesting.
I'm trying to think of I'm always thinking of how to simplify, but I'm trying to think of how to simplify what you just said. Like on my side, when I think of it took me a long time. So my first experiment into education was teaching Cantonese and Mandarin. So I wrote books on it. I taught people how to speak Cantonese and Mandarin. Then that went into, okay, now I'm an accountant and I hated it. And 2 years later, I quit. I became a photographer, and then it was teaching people how to do photography. And then it was teaching people how to do lighting and then posing. And then, okay, you don't know how to run a business. Let's figure out how to, and all of these pieces was really me laying out a manual for our own team members who I'd see struggle in each of these different arenas. And then I would develop a manual for them. And over 10 years, I realized I'm not actually passionate about photography, and passion in and of itself is, I think, a 4-letter word, but I'm not attached to photography. I'm attached to the cycle of taking something complex, simplifying it, and improving other people's lives with that. That's the piece that drives me. So taking a concept, simplifying, and improving, that also kind of narrows down the scope of like what I should be doing, because pretty much anything outside of that, anything outside of researching it, anything outside of writing it, anything outside of creating it, I shouldn't be doing. But I can't get to that with what you just said, because there's a lot of things that you could do, Ben, that fits what you just said.
Yeah, that's why I do a lot of things. But it's also why, like, how did you arrive to your fuel if it wasn't just trial and error?
I mean, it was to an extent trial and error. It was also looking at over the past, I've had a career for 10 years. Like that is at the, maybe 12. That's the place where you could say like, okay, Pi actually chose to do something. And it was looking back over those 12 years and saying, what is the thing that I've been doing most consistently, that I've been naturally driven towards and motivated towards? And it's been the creation of frameworks across every aspect of what I'm doing. So when it came to like the research for the book, naturally put itself together because I was collecting data for myself. And then writing the book was something that I was doing outside of work because I didn't know if it was going to become a business, that we would do together, or if it was going to be like a solo thing. So it was easy for me to make time outside of work to go and put towards it. And as I looked personally, like, where am I just naturally inclined to put my time? I kept landing on frameworks, educational frameworks. And why do I do that? Because I want to make things easier for people. I want to make their lives better in the way that I know how. Now, that is the way that so that kind of fulfills that last piece of like doing something that I think that most people can't do, right? So for me, I see the world in a way where, and I honestly think it's because I'm dumb. I think, I'm not an inherently smart person. I had a really hard time in school. I have ADHD. I'm not inherently intelligent. I've had to work and struggle to learn every single thing that I have. And so I have this unique approach to learning because I have to know the why behind every single dumb thing. Ben, I'm in jiu-jitsu class, and my instructor, who is a world-class grappler, and he fought MMA, and he's insane. He could murder people. Kindest guy in the world, Jiva Santana. I'm learning how to choke people out, and this is like, I've never done martial arts before, and I'm sitting on top of this other, my opponent, the other player, and my coach goes, okay, so this is mount, and from here we're going to do this. And my question as I raised my hand was, hey, professor, why do I want to be in mount? And he looked at me like I was the stupidest guy in the world. And granted, from his perspective, I probably am. But I don't understand the nature of something like that. Whereas other people can I feel like other people go into an area and they can intuitively understand why something is done. And guess what? In my opinion, because they intuitively understand, they are the worst educators on the subject. Because they don't know how to explain it from the standpoint of not understanding it. So that's the piece that I feel like, okay, that's why I can do this better than most. But
yeah. So, I mean, I think creating a framework there's so many different ways you could create frameworks. You could actually be in the space of applying a framework. You could be in the space of really just identifying problems or stringing problems out or improving frameworks that already exist or going about it. But you have a very specific approach and strategy that's designed around the activities that and skills that you have and the interests that you have. I mean, the reason you're starting a podcast is because you enjoy the conversational nature, but maybe the extension of a framework into other fields and how it may coincide. And so I think if you say, okay, I really love making frameworks, and you ask yourself why, and then you keep asking why, and you keep drilling it down to its compound elements, you eventually end up to, well, what are the things that, fuel you with joy? And it's kind of funny that you're there, and I feel like I think at the feeling side, but I can't get to I can't figure out the how part of it. So you have a how right now that's very clear to you. My how that I would normally default to is not available right now. It's currently not available. It's out of stock. So I need to figure out a new how, and that's the question. But the feelings are what power, I think, the thing. I don't know.
Well, the feelings are important. No, I think the feelings, I guess, are, yes, the feelings are critical in the sense of I feel everything that you described in what I said, this is where I want to be. So the podcast is a natural extension of it because it's the place where I get to hear other people's ideas. It's the place where I can begin that research process. It's the place where I get to learn and kind of transform and progress myself. So it kind of feeds me, right? But the baseline feelings of what were those things the sense of community I get through the podcast and the surrounding community, the underlying, is this something that I can do better than I have a hard time saying, am I the only person in the world who can do this? But I am one of the best at this. What were the other pieces that you mentioned? Yeah.
Essential, agency, tribe, and alignment are my four.
So those fit into exactly what I'm doing. I choose to do this. I'm part of a tribe, but I think it's difficult going bottom up like you're deciding right now, because there are so many things that fit into that criteria. Literally everything that you've been doing fits into that criteria. So knowing that those are the core feelings that you have been doing, what I would say is look top down now and say, what are the things that I've been most consistently doing over the past decade that are at the root of what I want to be doing? You could impact people's lives creating those documentaries, but it didn't kind of fit with your own, emotions and the stories that you necessarily wanted to tell. You could impact lives continuing down the road of creating environmental, campaigns. You can continue doing any one of those things. So that's what I'm curious about is what of those things that you've done for the past decade, where's the similarities? Do you know what I'm saying? Photography for me was not the similarity. The similarity was how I was moving from one area to the next and creating a piece of education and framework around that piece. That was the piece that was common, that stuck.
I can't answer the question, but I can walk you through what COVID was like for me.
Walk me through it.
And so the reason I started the podcast was kind of something similar to what you described. It's because I realized that how I was spending my time, how I enjoyed spending my time, was having conversations with people that were smarter than me in fields that I did not understand. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if conversations is where that essence lies, then I should be doing more of those. And if I'm going to be doing them anyways, I'm going to be taking them seriously, I should do a podcast. And so that's kind of how the podcast sort of came into existence on a conceptual level. And as I started diving into it, I wanted to have a core question that I wanted to answer. And that was, how do you better measure the impact of art? And the theory behind it was, if you can better measure the impact of art, then you can better sell the impact of art. If you can better sell the impact of art, then more people would create impactful art, because it would be something you would be creating the KPIs that people could measure impact by. But as I dove deeper into the podcast, you start realizing that impact means many different things to many different people, and how it's measured is not even, you don't even need to touch that. And art, even art, what is art? What is considered as art? And I ended up just sort of in this gray area where I just kept fishing, and I kept asking people, and people had interesting constructs, like the construct that, impact happens in both process and output, right? The process of co-creating with survivors of violence can create trust, right? It doesn't matter what they actually create, but you can co-create together. That process has impact. And then there's the output is kind of what I do, which is these campaigns. There's an output. Or if you really want to measure the impact of art, you can measure the impact of art, but you need a measurable environment. So for example, you could measure whether or not people heal faster with white walls or walls that have beautiful art on them. Why? Because every single person that walks in is measured when they come in, what they do, how they're feeling. It's all chronicled. So you can measure an effective state change. But then by and large, it sort of led me ultimately to this point, sort of, I think 18 or 20 episodes in, which was just, well, are you really measuring the right thing? Because just because you are able to derive a couple new KPIs, does that mean you've actually quantified and successfully captured what it means to be creating something impactful? So in the same way, so I was basically asking the question, like, is it possible to measure love, or, something as abstract as that? But, and so it just felt like I was asking the wrong question. Right. And so now we're, I don't know, somewhere in July or August. And I'm like, I've been asking the wrong question the whole time. What should I do with myself? And where do I go? What I want to do, I can do anything. I just need to put my mind in a direction. And I just kind of poked around. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's one of the tough things about being good at many things, is that you get this sort of decision paralysis.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I don't think I'm that great at that many things. I feel quite limited, but by the things I'm not good at. But I guess we all see our greatest flaws. But I was looking at the world and I realized that I was in Montreal, and I'm like, well, why would anyone want to live in Montreal? Like, what does Montreal have? Montreal has a lot of artists and it has a lot of data scientists. It's actually a really big artificial intelligence hub here in Canada. And I was like, you know what is lacking in data? So businesses make all their decisions based on data. I mean, businesses are making creative decisions based out of data. It's the foundation for everything that happens today. Yet data at the end of the day is, we are humans, right? A human is still, for the most part, making decisions. And so, how might we find different ways to humanize data? And when I looked at the work that I was doing, it's kind of what I've been doing. I have been creating data visualizations of consumption. That average number of plastic bottles a single person uses over the course of their lifetime, 10,000 plastic bottles. Great. Now I have converted a statistic into an emotion, into a feeling, into a memory, into a visual memory, or maybe something else. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something here. Could I do that? And then you get back into the question of how. But for me, the how is I'm always in that space of how. And my how always leads to finding people that are smarter than me to do something that is on the edge of what I think is possible. And how can I just find people and create something that hasn't been done before? And so that's just a space that I keep stumbling on. And so I no matter how I go about it, I end up back at square zero.
What is square zero for you? Not being satisfied by it?
I think square zero is having nothing but an idea.
Okay.
And now I just need to do the idea. And the struggle, I think, is there are a couple of struggles. Maybe one struggle is the fact that I have somehow evolved into a creature of projects. So I just do a project, and then I do a project, and then do a project. I don't create a body of things. I mean, there are trends, right? There are consistent moments inside of those, but I tend to, everything is a separate project. Every client is a separate client. Everything is created in a different country with a different team. Everything is super compartmentalized, and there's a certain amount of risk mitigation in doing that, right? You get the chance to really diversify your risk, and give you the maximum chance of trying new things that are new strategies and new techniques and new things. But I think one of the frustrations that I have recently is this, and this is a new realization, so it's not fully fleshed out yet, but is the sense that when you're an artist, you're often pushing your view of the world onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you are pushing at every step of the way. before the project exists, you're pushing a vision of what it could be. And so you're constantly re-educating people on what could be if only they saw the same things that you did. Later on in the project life, as you launch it, you're still pushing because now you're looking for visibility. You're looking for people to support it and see it and spread it and so on and so forth. And then later on, after you've had the success, now you're still pushing why this was actually something that was important, right? So you're constantly in the state of push. And I wonder, this wraps back into the first thing that we said about Peter Daring. And what I think is really interesting about the brand that he's created as Peak Design is that it operates on a pull model. It's saying, I'm going to create something that solves a problem. And I'm going to do it so well that people have no choice but to be pulled into me. I am going to create a new center of gravity for people to orbit around. And whatever I do just has to adhere to these specific values and rules. And that will be that. And I think as artists, the number of people that can create that same vortex of energy is very, very tiny. And so intrinsically, the creative field, in the way that I have designed mine, I don't think is conducive to shifting that around. And so I think those are maybe a couple of things that I'm thinking about a lot at this very moment.
We talked about how at the beginning of this, we talked about this online kind of world sort of has a tendency to, as soon as you find a formula, something that hits, right? You're then kind of swept up in this wave and people push you forward and you kind of want to capitalize on that wave. You want to ride it. You want to continue this thing that you're doing. And other people expect you to continue that same thing too, because they've come to know you for that. Now, nowhere is this phenomenon more visible than on TikTok, where you can become known for one small thing and literally do that one tiny thing nonstop. And if you deviate from that one thing, people are like, what happened to that one thing? Like, go back to that one thing. You are this person. That's what you are. But I almost feel like you fell into that formula before defining necessarily anybody that falls into that formula before defining what it is, who they are, their own mission statement essentially is kind of like you said, moving from project to project. Now, this isn't to say that you haven't done a lot of incredible things. You have. You've done more in your time here than most people do in a complete career. Okay. So in your decade in the industry, you've done more than somebody would in their entire lifetime. But what I am saying is that the Huawei campaign, these beautiful pictures and images and these high production things, you did those initially because it was can I do this? And then the momentum picks up and people start kind of giving you praise for this, right? And this is part of what you want. Part of what you want is community. So you kind of ride that wave because it gives you the sense of community. It gives you the sense of notoriety. It gives you that, importance. But what's missing critically in each one of these things is the valuable impact that you would want to have. But you're kind of inside of a wave that has, for the most part, it looks like where you want to be, but it's a little bit hollow as it's kind of pushing you along. Now, the dioramas would be the same exact thing. If you did that and you became known for that, it would become the same exact thing. But I can tell you how to tweak it, at least what I think would work. So if you give yourself a mission and purpose first, and then create around that and let the wave sweep you up with the mission inside of this wave, then you end up with something long-term and sustainable. And an example of how I think you could do that with let's say the dioramas, for example, you mentioned doing some installations, right? Well, what if you were doing an installation? Imagine an installation, a large format to life installation that kind of maybe represents one of the photographs, maybe like the mermaid's photograph, or one of the other photographs that you've done that have talked about environmental impact. So let's go along the lines of like the underwater shoot, and maybe in this gigantic diorama, you give examples and you show things falling into the ocean. It's beautifully lit. It's a beautiful backdrop, but it tells this story of pollution, and it tells this story of change, and it tells the story of impact that we're having on the environment. And at the base of this diorama is a life-size spot where a person would stand and photograph themselves inside of it. And now you have this highly shareable, engageable piece of content that crafts a story around each person that stands in that spot. And you create one of these dioramas, you now have this piece of work that is continuously being shared. It shares a message that is drawn to your core value of making an impact larger than just yourself and something that improves the world. But it's also engaging. It's also highly shareable. It's something that you are doing better than anybody else. But it's that piece that essentially ties the value, the meaning into the notoriety.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is not too dissimilar from what I've been doing, in that it's an installation that people can walk inside of. I think where it gets complicated, and this is most definitely me overthinking just about everything. I've been doing awareness-based kind of creations for a long time now, and I can say that I've created work that has generated hundreds of millions of views for different causes. But what I'm unable to say is what has changed as a result of these hundreds of millions of views. And I'm actually tired of views as a metric, because I don't think it's actually correct, right? If National Geographic speaks to people who care about animals, to people who already care about the animals, you're not really changing anything. You're just echoing what people already know. And it's very similar with the work that I've done. And so I think when I started in the ocean plastic space, it was an issue that was not very well known. I mean, the reason my piece resonated so strongly with, I think it was like 37 million views on the native video on Facebook, is because it was right at the discovery point of like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and very little people had actually created anything around the topic, at least on the magnitude that I had done it. Whereas now everyone's doing it. So we can make another installation. We can continue talking about the problem, but we're not changing anything. And so I think artists have this disconnection between the work and the impact. And that is a design problem, in the same way that we design products for single use. We design art expecting that if we create something valuable in the world, people will resonate with it, and then our job here is done. What you're really doing is you're pushing off responsibility for change and transformation to someone else. You're saying, all right, I did my part, now it's your turn. And so my theory of change around art...
Because isn't that...
Yeah, but...
Go ahead.
But it's changed. Yeah. So my theory of impact around art has actually changed and evolved. And I think it's less about talking about what's wrong. But there are certain things that need the awareness, don't get me wrong. But it's less about talking about what's wrong, but more about tying what's wrong with a solution. Because if you don't give people to act on their frustrations, then you just have frustrated people. If you don't empower people to do more than sign yet another petition to talk about the same problem they've already been talking about, or giving them the same 10 tips on how to recycle more and use less toothpaste, or shower less, or turn off the energy, you're not addressing people's core concerns. And so the reason I create less work is not because I have less creative ideas. It's because I'm unable to tie the project to a solution where I know that the visibility will actually make a difference, because I don't need more followers. I don't need more views. None of that does anything. What is interesting is figuring out who would benefit from these views, and how will that translate into a measurable improvement on the world. And so I take everything sort of these multiple steps deeper. And so every project I do, I add layers. The reason my projects are successful, I don't think is because they're prettier than the work of other people. I think it's because of the stories that you tell on how it came together. It's the community that got involved. It's not just the scale, because if you have money, you can create scale. It's the people on the ground and the community and the authenticity of how something is created and how something is brought to life that really gives the magic that I don't think many people do. And so,
but Ben, I think the only piece missing is monetization. I mean, honestly, the easiest way to tie your art to the solution is to generate money that then goes towards the solution. I mean, that is, because one of the things that I loved about your interview with Peter Daring was Peter understood that in order to make, basically rewinding the damage that you've done to the environment, your business has done to the environment, in order to make that process simple of removing the carbon that you've added, it's basically this easy buyback program, right? The easiest way for somebody to actually solve something is just to throw some money at it. But somebody has to have the system in place where you can actually just throw money at, right? But to put the job of removing carbon onto the individual businesses is impossible. And he even said that in the interview. And I was like, absolutely. Like, this is not, you need a business, you need something that is doing that job. And then you simply donate, you simply tax or give a portion of your income over to it to remove the carbon emissions that you are creating. That's how you simplify and get everybody involved in the solution. And what I see in the work that you've been creating so far is it's incredible. It's beautiful. It's gotten the views, but I think you're frustrated the fact that it's not tied to a solution. But the missing piece is just the money. If your diorama, if that installation was in a place that charged $10 admission, and of the admission, profits, let's say, 20, 30, 40% of the profits were to go towards the cause, then you would be directly, every single view, every single ticket sale, every single person that takes that picture and shares it and says, hey, this is a super cool place, you guys got to go do, your Instagram photos here, whatever. That would be directly tied to your solution, would it not?
I think it's thinking too small. So yes, I agree. That would be great. I could make an impact and I could donate dollars. But it's not designed systematic. It's not a part of the solution. It's like a company that creates something and then, like, if the business model is to do damage to then offset it, rather than a social enterprise, which is designed around a triple bottom line that is intimately created with community in mind, and a stakeholder-driven process as opposed to a shareholder-driven process. Like, I think at the core, the way you structure something really does matter. And art, and I think this is where art is just a really hard thing. And maybe it just boils down to the fact that I don't know how powerful art actually is. So, as an artist, you're supposed to go out there and talk about how, the closest distance, or the hardest gap to close is the distance between the heart and the mind. And if you can close that distance, anything is possible. And you can be like, art is the key to make that happen. But do I truly believe that? Because I don't buy art. I don't surround myself with art. I don't spend my day looking at art. I can't name many art inspirations that I look at and I go like, oh, it's because of this thing that I am now doing what I am doing and where I'm headed towards. Although there are certainly art pieces that have done that. I don't know. Here, let me throw a completely different curveball at you to reset the conversation a little bit. The idea I've been most excited about recently has been this hot glue sticks.
I thought that was a hot glue stick. Okay, what about a hot glue stick is exciting you?
There is not a single biodegradable hot glue stick that exists in the world right now, and hot glue guns are it's something like everyone has touched at some point in their life. Every single school has one. Every household with kids has one. It's just such a basic craft building material. Mm-hmm. And I've had to use these for my projects. And it's like, well, I'm using plastic in order to talk about, how we're creating too much plastic. And I'm like, why does a biodegradable option not exist? And to be able to provide people with a tool, which I think comes closer to what you do, which is you create a framework, you provide a baseline component that everyone can then apply and apply to whatever their situation is. I think there's some interest of scale there that I find far more intriguing than making another installation. And I think that it's the sustenance of the simplicity of a fundamental building block that can have the impact because it is designed in a way that is fundamentally impactful, that can unlock creativity, not just create my own. I can be the most successful artist in the world, and I will only be able to create as much as I can create. What is much more interesting is shifting the rules of the game, which is why I was interested in that original idea of how do you better measure the impact of art. It's not about how successful I can be. It would be, what if What if all the creatives didn't have to go by this whole like, oh, I need to go into the commercial world, I need to make money so that I can come back and do good. I mean, that's a really inefficient way of changing the world, of having to first ruin it and go back and be like, oh wait, now what can I do now that I'm older and more responsible? How can you make it more desirable on the onset? How can you just shift the value statement? So I think fundamentally I'm interested in changing the rules of the game as opposed to playing by the rules. And I think you're maybe a little similar there, is you try to completely fundamentally shift the way people learn and see and interact with it.
But I'm also detaching myself from the result, like that's one area that I feel like you might be a little bit too close to it, because if somebody reads the book and they choose to go and they still have a craptastic, family life and friend life and marriage, that's their choice. Like I'm as much as we want to have our own agency and our own freedom to do what we want, so we must grant everybody else the same agency to do what they want and disconnect ourselves from whether they follow. I mean, that's something that I had to do a long time ago, because on our current frameworks, on our current education, I've taught people how to build a 7-figure business. If that's their goal, is to, get away from their day jobs and do that. Every step, including a 52-week program. I mean, Ben, this thing is like literally every step of how to do this is right there. And the number of people that do it, well, first of all, the number of people that purchase compared to the number of people online that complain about they don't know how to, be successful, that's insane. Then the number of people that purchase that actually put it and implement it is, again, fractionally small, 1%, 2%, 3%. So I think your expectation, I love the way that you dream, but I also feel like your expectations might hold you back in a way, because the reality is never going to live up to it. People need, as much as we want to design this corporate structure where people create a business that has a 3-level profit line, that, everything that you just said, where it's from the beginning and not just repairing the damage that's done. We also need an A to Z step-by-step process. Peter Daring's vision was interesting because it's the next step. It's the first step in going towards Z is B, which is just pay for the damage you're doing. Then you have C, which is, okay, go beyond that. Then you have D, and you have each of these steps until you get down to Z. And I feel like you might be losing yourself in the Z as opposed to seeing what's in front of you.
Which is why hot glue sticks is a very simple.
So what would you do on the hot glue stick side?
I don't know. I'm good at marketing things. I just need to find a supplier. I need to find a supplier of nurdles. Ideally like a PHA based solution that is biodegradable. It just turns into nutrients for animals, and it's often made from food waste.
So when you come up with this product and you begin marketing it, what do you do when it's not widely accepted as the new form of hot glue?
It doesn't need to be widely accepted. It just needs to consistently grow. I think that's what's interesting about it, is the consistency of it, right? People who adopt it will continue to grow it. As you make more of it, it'll get cheaper. As it gets cheaper, more people will be interested in it. Ideally, everyone will start copying it, and then I will be put out of business and I won't need to do it anymore. Great. I mean, I think that's the beauty. It's the beauty of nonprofits. I mean, the goal of every nonprofit should be to put itself out of business, right? And similar with social enterprises. I mean, I'm being a little bit flippant here, obviously, but I do think that there's something really interesting, because then you can take this as the funding source. But if your funding source is intimately doing good, then you can power a bunch of experiments to eventually lead to this greater goal of developing. I think for me, it's about developing, and I've tried to do this, by the way. I'm just not good at frameworks. I wrote like a 10-page document of my entire process of coming up with a creative concept, all the way down to launching it and executing it, and it's specifically designed for photographers. But I can't convert it into anything more interesting than a 10-page document. Not my superpower.
It's an interesting thought, and I'm just trying to think of like, what would be the best way of, let's say, this idea from the hot glue gun and the hot glue, the best way of getting this thing to market. I mean, you need capital, or you need somebody that does have that capital. And then,
that's the easy part, man.
well, you're going to need your clout as well. And then you're going to need the time to stick with it.
It's what I've been doing for my whole life, is marketing things that actually people don't want. And now I finally have something to market that people actually do want. I see that as the easy part. I've been living in San Francisco for 3.5 years, between either finding people who know how to run brilliant Kickstarters like Peter, who keeps coming up, or using an equity crowdfunding platform like Republic or one of these others, or just reaching out to VCs or angel investors that I've encountered along the way. I mean, that's the easy part.
So what is the hard part? Or
it feels like the easy part. Oh, I need to figure out the technology. I actually don't know if this is materially possible. And so I like talking about my half-assed ideas, because I might find the person who knows a little bit more than me this way.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, what other ideas do you have along this vein? What are the things that you're throwing around? Like, going into 2020, you have this time to, I mean, we're coming out of 2020 now, but, and the time that this is released, it'll be early 2021, but you've had time to kind of process. So I imagine that there's several ideas bouncing around. So what are the ones that are sticking at the moment, other than the glue gun?
Yeah, just the different things bump around. I think artist residencies need to be fundamentally reimagined and redesigned. So we look at corporations, and you talk about how we need companies to be more innovative, and we need them to think outside of the box. We need them to cross-pollinate and do other things. And I'm like, hey, who does all of that? And that's like their job. It's like artists. But we think of artists, and we think of artist residencies. If I take like a Facebook artist in residency, they're just glorified decorators. They're there to decorate the walls of Facebook, or the Facebook campus, and create pretty art. But that's not what it's about. Wouldn't it be interesting to bring an artist from a community, since Facebook is supposed to be about community building, to talk about how online and offline worlds interact, and just have that person float around, co-create next to these engineers, and have conversations with them, have them think and talk about things that they wouldn't normally talk about. What kind of conversations and what kind of innovations would happen, and how much more human would you make the entire process? Like that to me is sort of the new way of the artist. We talk about how the future is creative, and how the world needs more creative thinkers, and that ultimately the jobs that are going to have the most value are the ones that are replaceable by AI and machine learning are these creative thinking leaders. But how are we developing them? Well, we're not. Like they're not designed that way. But we could apply that immediately. So I think there's tremendous opportunity in the art residency world, and that's something that I talk to anytime I find like a corporate person to bounce this idea off of, and see if I can use myself as a guinea pig, because it's always fun to use yourself as a guinea pig.
What's the next one? What else you got? I can tell there's a bajillion of these popping around your head. So give it to me. What else you got?
What else do I have? One thing that I'm working on is a television show, an episodic series. I think that we often focus on once again, we focus on the output. We don't focus on the process. And the short form documentary, the fact that a lot of episodic series are really interesting these days is because people fall in love with the character. They fall in love with the journey. So if you can go around and you can create this. This is specifically in my case, right? This is taking what I am good at and just following me around, entering a community, finding someone, and applying this sort of David versus Goliath principle. So we celebrate when someone who is perceived as weaker gains victory over the big evil person. And one of the interesting byproducts of having become now a fairly successful photographer is I'm not so much a David as much anymore. So it's less compelling when I create really cool things, because I should be creating cool things at this stage of my career. But what you can do is you can elevate people who are doing really cool things, that are local and community-based and doing wonderful things. And if you do that, if you find the local champions and you elevate them in the cause that they believe in, and you simply give them the framing and the megaphone to do what they do, but you do this in a way that is co-creative as opposed to just, I think documentaries just like feature a person, or they just tell that story. You could create something really, really cool. And for me, it would be an opportunity to take my entire process and put it on display. All the moments that you don't normally see, actually take the time to flesh it out instead of having to crush it into a 3 to 5 minute video. So that's another thing that's kind of in the works. That's being kind of poked around. I've increasingly stepped into the shoes of a creative advisor. I think, one of the things that I was thinking about in the pandemic was like, okay, well, ultimately impact follows money. As you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but like, it's not the $50,000 or the $1 million that I raise that's going to move the needle. Where is the institutional money sitting? And you're talking trillions of dollars. You're talking about pension funds. You're talking about sovereign wealth funds. Like where are these people spending their money? And so, what if you could actually use your abilities as a storyteller to affect the flow of capital? I mean, that if you want to talk efficiency, there's something really interesting there. And so I've been talking to different wealth managers, and these are through my old speaking engagements that I used to do at these different wealth funds, and just offering to support their storytelling efforts to empower the people who have these new value-driven funds to tell better stories, because now you can start influencing the flow of capital in these institutions. And I think there's something really powerful there, right? So you look at me.
That's the interesting thing, because if you were to say, which of these things should I do? That would be where I would put you. It would be into the creating imagery and marketing campaigns around the entities that are set up and doing the things that you want already.
Yeah, potentially.
But the hot glue wouldn't be one of them.
No, but you're looking at me only through the lens of image making.
No, I'm looking through the lens of, you said you also said one of the criteria was efficiency, right? So efficiency would take, what are your core competencies right now? Uh-huh. And like, let's play out this hot glue scenario. First of all, I think before you dive down something like that, it would be really important to see what is the actual global impact of hot glue guns compared to every other source of pollutant that is available. Would creating a biodegradable hot glue actually make a significant difference? Or, is this thing kind of one of the smaller impacts that we're currently having? Because along the lines of like what you were saying was maximizing efficiency and effectiveness, right? And with your level of skill and talent, I would think that one would possibly one of the most inefficient ways of going about this would be to address it from that standpoint. So if we're talking efficiency and I'm looking at Von Wong and core competencies, then I would say among your core competencies is the ability to create artwork that, I'm not looking at you as a photographer. I'm looking at you as a creative who tells stories via whatever medium you want, but stories that have meaning and purpose. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of one of your current core competencies. And then saying, let's align that with the entity that's already set up and structured. Because let's say that you come back and hot glue guns are indeed a big issue and we need to resolve this. For you to go and create that business, to source it, to find the product, do everything, it's a very long route to making an impact, especially once you have a product, then it's getting it to mass adoption. What if it's more expensive than existing hot glue and people just don't care? They're like, I'm just going to keep buying the stuff that I'm buying. Then you go through this 10-year period of adoption of just trying to get people on board with it versus the impact that you could have right now by finding an organization aligned with what you want to do. And in 6 months, having a incredible, multi-layered campaign. It doesn't have to be photography only. It doesn't have to be anything only. It could be a multi-layered campaign that incorporates cinema, photo, dioramas, real installations. It could be a whole gamut of things that ties, but you would be making that impact in 6 months. And I'll tell you this, dude, you might be annoyed because you don't have KPIs attached to the stuff that you're doing, right? But when you put out those videos on plastic use, I can tell you personally that I changed my own habits and behaviors when it came to single-use bottles. So it's super difficult to track individual KPIs around stuff like this, but it is making an impact.
Yeah. When I think about, so with your story campaign thing, it's not as if that door is ever shut. That door is always open and it's consistently being worked on. It's just that I know, because this is my world, that these might happen 1 a year or 2 a year.
Yeah.
And in the best case scenario. And that leaves a lot of time where I'm not doing very much. And I don't think it's either or. See, I think you underestimate the hot glue gun in that it's, yes, you have volume of glue, but if you think that each piece of art can reach X number of people, you're creating an entire class of creative expression that is currently impossible. You're creating an entire sort of tribe of individuals. It's just like how the 3D printer brought out a very specific style of maker. Now, I'm not saying, obviously a glue stick is not on the same caliber. However, it would power an entire source of sustainable creativity that is actually very popular in schools, because it's a fundamental educational sort of building principle that is starting to be incorporated. When we talk about building circularity into our lives, at what age do you learn that? The younger, the better. And so I actually think that this is a product that would sell at double the price. And when we think about change at scale, like I think we get lost in this idea or this need to be the next Elon Musk or the next Bill Gates. But you could be the next Peter Daring. And he, he's bringing in, I think, give or take $100 million a year right now. He makes accessories like bags and cameras, but to think of what he can create with that momentum. So I don't see the glue gun as a destination. I just see it as a really practical and interesting step to explore that shifts you from being the artist into being more of the activist. And there's a difference here, because when you're an artist, you try really hard to be weird and different, right? The weirder you are, the more different you are, the more outstanding you are, the higher you can price your things, because the more exclusive it becomes. When you're an activist, you want everyone to do what you do. You want to empower the world to do the same thing that you do, because if there were more of you, theoretically, you think the world would be a better place, right? And so I sit on those two borders, and I don't worry about getting work. I think the work will come no matter what I do, and I might have a slow year here, I might have a slow year there. Next year, I might do 3 things, and they might be wonderful. I have no doubt that something cool is going to come out next year. I don't need to. That's not the problem. The work's going to create itself. I'm going to meet someone. Some dumb idea is going to happen. Somehow it's going to come to life, and you'll get a video. But there has to be something more than that. I can't just be, what am I going to do in 10 years, in 20, in 50 years? Like, am I going to still just be like, hey, I can create a big campaign, a big project? Like, and that big project thing, it doesn't work as an agency, because you're still operating on a finite linear scale. It's limited to you and what you do with your time. And so I like your framework thing, because your framework thing, it could impact one person, it could impact 1 million people. Like, you don't really know, but you're creating the fundamental building block, the learning systems under which people can now see the world through different lenses. That's something really fundamentally interesting. And I think that the potential for fundamentally shifting the way the operating system that people navigate the world is far more interesting than the next cool story that I can tell. And I don't need to put time and energy to telling the new story, because those opportunities are going to come. This is what people know me for. So people are still knocking on the door.
Well, so part of my assumption and premise was that, your schedule is booked. And so you have a limited amount of time, right? You have a limited amount of time. You can choose to go down whatever route you want to go down. Now, I don't want to come off like I'm hating on the glue stick idea, because I'm not. What I am saying though is, like, if there were a certain number of projects, like in my opinion, if you're talking immediate impact, and since we've been talking about Peter so much, reaching out to Peter and reaching out to Peter and saying, let's go do campaigns around the, carbon emissions thing would have something immediate, as opposed to like maybe waiting 10 years before having a significant impact on glue sticks. But that being said, I'm not hating on the glue stick thing. I'm simply saying, is this the most impactful thing that you could be doing? And second, your time is limited. Now, maybe you're doing like 2 major commissions a year, and so you have plenty of free time. But for you, I can tell you this, given your skill set and what you are good at, knowing what to say no to is going to be far more important than knowing what to say yes to.
Yes. This year has not been busy. It's been kind of wonderful in really weird ways. But I think you underestimate my appeal. Because I'm not cookie cutter, I can't tell you what you're going to get if you hire me. Actually, a big part of pre-hiring me, like the way I create a campaign is split into 3 phases.
Ooh,
There's my lights automatically turn red.
And how could I be underestimating you, my friend? Tell me this. Uh-oh, I just lost your voice.
Yeah, no, oh wait, sorry. That's not what I was trying to say. Alexa, film.
Dude,
I'm trying to change my lights back automatically to the right color.
Going on here. Look at this.
There you go. There you go. Everything's back to the right color. So to create the work that I do, there are 3 phases. There's design, prototype, and execution. So very much, actually, I got so tired of people reaching out to me and saying like, "Oh, your work is so cool. Like, let's talk. What could we do together? Let's just chat." And then we'd go through months of iteration of ideas that would never see the light of day for whatever reason. Like either because the concept wasn't good, either because something shifted, someone got fired, someone got hired, some new agency got brought on board, some new campaign shifted, Trump, said something. Something would happen, the whole project would go, and I would have nothing to show for it. And so I really started splitting things up into design, prototype, and execution, where like it's saying, hey, you're interested in having a conversation with me. If you're serious about talking, let's start on a retainer and let's talk for like a month or 2. And so that was working pretty good. But to go from design and to go to prototype and to go to like each one, you have a fair amount of attrition, right? Yeah. Like so many people fall off because people look at the work that I create based on the videos that I do. And the videos make it look easy, right? It looks obvious. But like something as simple as saying, "Oh, I really love your straw installation. Can you make the same thing for us?" I'm like, cool, where are we going to get the straws from? They're like, "Oh, well, we didn't really think about this. Do you think you could like organize that?" And I'm like, "So you want me to collect straws in Vietnam and bring them to your headquarters in the United States? And what would the story be there?" And they'd be like, "Oh, well, we just think it's cool." That's not how it works, right? Because everything that I do is bespoke. It's not about the end product. It's about the story and how you get there. And so much of that is lost. And so you said, "Oh, you should go talk to Peter and talk to Climate Neutral and try to do a project with them." I'm already talking to them. But this conversation might lead to a project in 3 years. This doesn't lead to a job that I can now instantly have and create in 6 months, because that's not how ideas actually, the ideas aren't born that way. The Huawei contract that I got, the biggest contract of my career, the art director discovered me on Flickr. The first photo shoot I did, which was a failure, by the way, trying to light like a stuntman on fire. And he'd been following me on Flickr for years. That somehow led into the biggest job of my career 3 years later. And I would say that most of the leads that I've ever pursued have led nowhere. And it's always the ones that are the most unexpected that just come out of nowhere. And you're like, "Oh, you're actually serious. Oh, you figured that whole money thing out because you've been following me for so long." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Like, let's do something." And you can never really pinpoint where those opportunities come. So I am constantly planting seeds for campaigns because that's actually the easiest thing to market. Because when you look at me from the outside, you don't know who I am. You're scrolling through my work. You're like, "Oh, this guy is an artist. Okay, check. This guy's an environmentalist. Check. This guy does photography. Some people know me as a photographer. Some people know me as an installation artist. Some people know me as a filmmaker. The people who know me for film want me to make a film. The people who know me for installations want me to make an installation. The people who know me for photography want me to make photography." And I'm like, well, actually, what underlying all of this is like the rest of the iceberg. What makes my work unique is all the thinking that goes behind it and all the planning and all the thought and care to the story on how we're going to design this together. And that's the part that nobody knows about. And the reason why I can be in a room right now and I can be advising startups is because there's a whole component to what I do that transcends the work that I create. And so, you're saying, or your idea earlier about the diorama is saying, oh, you can just go out and create dioramas. And sure, there's a business model there. I mean, that's exactly what the people like 29 Rooms or Ice Cream Museum or any one of these Color Factory, all these different replicas of people who are creating rooms, and they were just traveling with them. There is a business model to that, but that's not what's interesting. That's not what makes the work interesting and unique and different, because if everyone could do it, then everyone would do it. And so this is once again, you fall in, well, are you an artist? Are you an activist? And the two don't really gel together. So fundamentally, there's something that's a little bit broken here, where I am a lot more than the work that you see. And so I have no problem doing more work. I have no doubt that those are things that will align, because I'm not, sitting around waiting for things to happen. I'm proactively out there continuously talking to people. The work is going to come. What's more interestingly is what is the fundamental shift that I can create, and how can I do that in a way that will change the rules of the game, and how can it empower more people to do what they want? How can it unlock an entire market opportunity that I think is desperately needed in order to shift humanity forward?
I think you might have to let go of that efficiency clause then. Something doesn't have to be both efficient and also have broad impact. I mean, if something has broad impact, who cares whether it was efficient or not? So the part of the efficiency that gets me locked into, you as a creative is that piece. It's remaining efficient to what you are, but you don't have to be. You can literally deviate to any possible thing, but I think you need to change the expectation of it being efficient.
Yeah, I think if the efficient thing is maybe more of it's more of a destination, like knowing that it's going to be like a lifelong journey to get there, right? Because it's sort of like progress. You would hope that you would get more efficient over time. But I look at the work that I do and I actually see it going in the opposite direction. It's, oh, Ben does big, crazy things, so let's do bigger, crazier things. And the bigger, the crazier it is, the better it's going to be. It reminds me of I don't know if you saw the Netflix series Love, Death, Robots. There's a piece on like Zuma. It's great. So Love, Death, Robots has a series of short 20-minute, 10-minute films that are animated. And in one of them, it's about this artist, this amazing artist. He does beautiful work. He created these portraits, started painting portraits of the galaxy, and just makes them bigger and bigger and bigger, and to the scope of planets, where he started painting entire asteroid fields, and it just like his work just kept getting bigger. And it was like, but where is it going from here? Right? It addresses that question, and I don't want to ruin the ending for you, but it addresses that entire question of like, well, when is it enough? And so I think I've oddly enough made a name where bigger is better, crazier is better. Yet the message that I'm trying to push forward is that less is more, less is better, because you want to use less, you want to buy less, you want to consume less. That is better. And it's just these two opposite messages that are just crammed into this weird box.
But you've done it so far very well, because
but where does it go? And so it's that the direction is the thing that I'm challenging myself, is saying, I know I can have impact in this way, and I can continue to have impact, and it will likely grow in a linear fashion. I think that is taken. I think I can just take that. I can have the faith in the universe that this will go on, and I could change my coefficient, my linear coefficient, by starting an agency or ramping up, right? Trying to create more mini-me's. But I'm still stuck on the linear scale. And what I am really excited by is that exponential shift. And I think you do that by empowering everyone and changing a system.
I mean, an exponential shift in this, which I don't even know if that would be, I don't know if it would be even something possible, but I mean, if there were a 99 designs of highly sophisticated environmental creative artists that corporations could see and hire.
But see, even environmental is too little. Because
it could be
the environmental thing is yet another box, right? So now that I've done environmental projects, I'm now an environmental artist, and I'm like, but hey, I care about humans too.
No,
I care about the other components of the system.
I mean, and essentially a website, so the way I think of scale is like figuring out the formula and then bringing out to large amounts of people, right? But in this case, like your formula is very specialized, and would there even be enough? But if you had, like, let's say a 99 Designs, and the whole goal of the site, 99 Design is a site where, for people that don't know, is a site where you can basically, like, put up work, and then designers and creatives and artists and whatever will come and fulfill that work for a contract rate. But it's such a specialized area that I don't think a website of this nature would even go. But imagine just a marketplace where you could find creatives that designed every type of artwork to meet every type of social need. But would it be useful? Probably not. Would people want it? Probably not. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know.
There are so many different ways. Yeah,
I don't know the
so many
solution
different
to your problem, dude.
There's so many different ways to tackle the same problem. Another idea I had, so many dumb ideas that who knows, maybe there'll be a great idea one day. This other dumb idea I had, which is, okay, do you know X Prize? It's like this huge, I think it was this $10 million or $100 million prize that was created by Peter Diamandis to create exponential technologies that can help save the planet in some capacity. And every year they'll come up with a theme, whether it be plastics or climate change, and they'll pour all this money into this one winning startup. And it's created a tremendous amount of excitement in different spaces around, like, carbon capture or plastics or anything like that, because the prestige and the prize money actually compels a different style of creativity. It creates a different kind of innovation. And so, what if you could take and port that same model to art? What if the value of art was not defined by its output and how much someone is willing to pay for it, how many millions it can get in a gallery, but what if it was defined by the outcomes that it's had on people? And I'm not even telling you how to do it, but I'm telling you that the prize is $100 million. Would you like to try? And I'm not going to tell you how we're going to measure the winner, because that's going to be done by some experts or some algorithm, something. But if you said, I had $100 million and we're going to change the way people perceive something, I think there's this whole element around culture that we don't think about. There's so much power to culture that is not necessarily being leveraged in ways that could be interesting to look into and to explore. When I think of the People's Republic of China and how they have successfully commandeered 5,000 years of history on which to rewrite history to build on the legitimacy of the government entities. They've redefined what it means to be Chinese by choosing elements of history to remember and others to forget. And the amount of art that came in through the Cultural Revolution, and we see the same in, I think, patriotic art that, let's say, Donald Trump does. A lot of how patriotism has been hijacked in the United States to mean something very specific. Culture has a lot of power to shift behavior that isn't being capitalized on or invested in by many people. And so I do a lot of thinking around these topics, and more often than not, I come up with ideas that don't necessarily go anywhere, but they're just these reflections where I see glimmers of potential that are far more interesting than any individual piece that you could potentially do.
Do you feel like they're not invested in and capitalized on because it is immeasurable? I mean, one of the most difficult things about any one of these forms of new media is getting companies to recognize their value is very difficult, because it's hard to track an impression to an actual end result. Like, of somebody that sees an image or a video or whatever it might be, it's difficult to lead that over to the sale unless they directly click. But that's not the way our minds work. Our minds generally work from long-term impressions. We see something 7, 8, 9, 10 times, and we eventually make a decision. In the case of, like, for example, becoming more environmentally aware, I can say that a part of my awareness was developed through your videos. And a significant part of that awareness also came through other documentaries. But it would be almost impossible to track the actual impressions, the actual results from any one of those things, which make them difficult to invest in.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's impossible to track now. I don't think it doesn't mean it's going to be impossible in 10 years. I mean, we know things about you from a data perspective that we would never have been able to know 10 years ago from using phone book and census and polls that we can now harness. No, but this is literally the direction we are heading. And the whole businesses are designed around this entire premise of being able to track you. Like, we track our health, we track our sleep, we track our interests, we track our relationships, our love, like we track everything. And at some point, all of these sort of compile into, you can draw enough comparisons to really say, well, where do the inflection points in culture actually happen, and how are they driven, and which are the most effective ones? And once we reach that point and we can actually start quantifying these things, I actually do think there'll be a lot of money coming in. And as with all these different things, if you're ready for it when the wave comes, you'll do a lot better. So even if I might not know what to do now, I think the fact that you ask the questions and you design the frameworks positions you for something that's far more interesting in 10 years. And so I think it is interesting to think about where the world is heading and how are the different industries reacting, and how do all these pieces cross-pollinate together and play a role. Because even when we think about culture, and you say right now maybe it's not investable, but I mean, I could paint a picture for you where think of venture funds. There are a number of different ethical or impact-oriented venture funds that are coming out. And these are people that have hundreds of millions of dollars. But these hundreds of millions of dollars are distributed across a number of different startups. And each startup is now making their own marketing campaigns. Who is investing in developing the entire ecosystem, right? If you started investing in developing, let's take something like nuclear energy as an example. If you had a number of different sovereign wealth funds and venture funds that had a desire to see nuclear proliferate because it had a lot of money and investment in it, the most effective way to do that is to shift public sentiment and to start pouring a lot of capital into creating positive, inspiring images that could help shift public opinion of something. And you would have an incentive model behind it. Instead of having each person creating their own little thing, what if you create an entire bank of things? So I think there are a lot of different potential avenues where things can and will start to grow, because there is so much conversation around the importance of creativity, and so many more conversations these days about the importance of all the invisible and intangible things that we cannot see. The importance of resilience, the importance of community, the importance of relationships, the importance of being connected with yourself. And so to me, we're heading there, right? There's a lot, the wellness space is a phenomenally over-marketed space. It has very different KPIs too, right? Like, its KPIs are like, what are we measuring really? But it's there, and we know it's important. And I think art will have its day one day. I'm not sure. Maybe I just have to believe it because I'm an artist. But maybe it's something a little bit more tangential to it, and that's why the hot glue thing is interesting.
I love all the ideas, the thoughts, the questions. I will say, the solutions are above my pay grade, my friend. I focus on stupid simple. So it's going to take people like you and that are others that are much smarter than me to figure this out. But
yeah, I think it's to my detriment sometimes, but I hear you, and I don't know if there's a capacity of it where it's like, oh, I see how that could be. I see how that could work, but I can't see myself enjoying it in 3 to 5 years, or I can't see myself changing something about it. Then I think I kind of lose interest in it.
Tell me if you think this is stupid. And I love the fact that we've spent the last 45 minutes just spitballing weird ideas. But I think this is one of my favorite episodes. So let's say that you have these, like you said, a lot of these venture capital funds are basically impact funds now, and it's becoming trendy and more popular now to invest in companies that are having a positive environmental impact. So would it be possible if there were a platform, kind of like a Kickstarter, that was basically designed for creatives, but it's not just for creatives. It's actually for companies to create campaigns around something like you said, like no nuclear proliferation, like basically let's make nuclear energy more popular. And so this company basically dedicates a certain amount of money to this, essentially a global competition where filmmakers, artists of all sorts, photographers, everybody's invited to basically participate in creating media around an idea to win this prize. Would that be feasible?
It depends, because you're talking about developing a marketplace, and in my experience, there is a lot more supply than there is demand in these kinds of things, and importantly, so like my idea, my $100 million idea was interesting and important because it was shifting culture and the way we value art. It was shifting a definition of what constitutes good art in a way that has never been done before. If it's a $1,000 prize for anyone to create something compelling and you get to win $1,000, I don't think it really does the same thing. Could it? Well, the thing is, like, you can run this test, right? You could create you could open like a number of Fiverr challenges and see what comes out of it. But I think if you stop only at the output, which is the widget that you're just asking people to create, I don't think you get to the essence of what is exciting about the idea itself. I think somewhere in this is the exchange of shared humanity and the abstraction of certain ideas and ideals, where it becomes even more exciting. But I think I just fundamentally don't believe that there's a marketplace for it at this very moment in time, because if there were, it would already exist.
You think?
If people are willing to pay for something, they don't need it. If I was a company looking for a sustainable piece of content, I can use any number of existing platforms to commission it, right? So the need for a concentrated area is not really there. So when I talk about ecosystem development, I think it's a very different kind of energy exchange. It revolves more so around a community of co-creators and conspirators that is designed in a sustainable way.
Well, my friend, I am down to be your whiteboard that you throw ideas off of all night long. So we're going to have to do this again at some point, but I appreciate you coming on.
I'm surprised you're still engaging in the expansion of my weird ideas.
It's a very interesting concept. I love big dreamers, dude. And you are a big dreamer. And I think the main thing for me is whenever, I hear big dreams, I kind of think of, yeah, but what's step one? Like, how many steps do we have to divide this into? And what is step one?
Yeah.
But I love where you're trying to go with it. I think redefining people's current and existing notions of something is incredibly difficult. I mean, even going to like really dumb and simple things, once people have these ingrained behaviors, it's so difficult to like redefine and to be like, nobody prints anything anymore, right? Like nobody actually prints a photograph or a piece of artwork. How many people hang something on their wall? You said yourself, you don't even like hang artwork on your wall. So I could shout from the rooftops of, which I have, like, hey, you can dramatically impact the psychology of your family, your children by simply hanging art in your home. But nobody does it because they have their own behaviors. And so I think it's easier to capitalize on existing behavior like 100 times easier to find a way to take existing behavior and shape it to what you want to do versus trying to change the behavior. But I love the thoughts.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It becomes about designing a better system, right?
Yeah.
It's not about telling people to go backwards. It's telling people to go forwards, and that forwards direction is interesting and exciting. I think actually you did hone in on a step one that I do think is important is what is the purpose and the mission ultimately, and that's something that I really struggle with, and I think it's this sort of this idea the problem is that I'm a little bit of a butterfly. I'm a novelty junkie. I love knowing and learning about things I don't know. I love meeting new people that I've never met before. I love discovering something different and having that cross pollinate with the ideas that I've already kind of seeded along the way. And it's that novelty seeking, that need to always be a total newbie at whatever it is I end up in, that makes it really, really challenging.
Can't the podcast be that for you?
I think it's sort of what it's evolved into, right? It explores, how impact happens in all sorts of different ways. It explores all these different lifestyles of people who've led so many different lives to end up where they are. So I think it is sort of what it is. It's terrible for SEO, and I know it. It's like the show that I'm building is horrible. It's really hard to recommend because you might like one episode, you won't like the other. It's not themed. It's all over the place, but it's my brain.
Either. Yeah. But
yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is, like your podcast, take away the 2-day long artwork that you create to promote each episode and let's just focus on the podcast in and of itself. I feel like that could be your playground to explore all these different things. What I'm saying right now is that oftentimes I think we get stuck in this place where we feel like we have to make everything have all the meanings, all the purpose, all the everything, right? And it's a really dangerous spot, because as soon as what it is that you're doing loses one of those things, or it doesn't have the same meaning, doesn't have the same purpose, we very quickly just can't deal with it. But I'll tell you a story just from my own personal experience. When I was going through my divorce, work lost all of its purpose and its meaning for me. I mean, documenting people's weddings and doing all that kind of stuff, when I just felt like, this whole institution is completely flawed and people don't understand what's going on. That to me was incredibly difficult, and it lost its meaning. It lost its purpose. And honestly, I lost a lot of drive in that area until I realized, there are times that work can just be work. Like, it's okay to spend some time going and doing my job and treating it as a job. And I stopped having the expectation that work was supposed to be fulfilling and it was supposed to be every single thing that I wanted from it. And I went through a 2-year period where it wasn't those things. It was just my job, and I did my job well, and everything was fine. But what I did at that point was, that's when I began writing the book. That's when I began compiling all my data. That's when I began doing everything else. So I looked for the fulfillment and those things in a different arena. And so I think the podcast could be like, minus all the time consuming stuff that like literally is impossible to sustain, which is building those dioramas around each episode. The podcast can be just your place to do that exact thing of exploring new ideas, of fulfilling this craving that you have for wandering out into other areas and taking other people's expertise and making it part of your own. And you minimize the amount of time. You don't need to minimize, but at least you control the amount of time there by not letting it, blow up with all these added little pieces that just kind of make it unsustainable. You kind of only dedicate a certain piece of time there. Then you choose one of these other ventures, the one of these other things that gives you the other sense of like making change and doing all the things that you want to do to execute on. But I think it's one of those cases where you may need to have 2 things going at once to bring yourself into this alignment. Like, each of these things fulfill different needs that you have. And with the 2 of them together, you can continue doing it indefinitely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not just working on my podcast anyways. So that's sort of what's already been happening. The podcast is this space to stay accountable to my own learning and growth and explorations. I don't really test ideas out per se, because I think on a podcast, the power dynamic is generally that of making the person you're interviewing look good. I just think that's how they're sort of designed to be, even though they're built around a conversation. And then, but specifically to what you just said, I think you're basically talking about the importance of play and diving into curiosity and exploring that. And one of the interesting lessons of COVID for me is this idea that I am a ambivert, and that's something I've always known. So I love being around people. So I get energy from talking to people, but I also need to be alone. And COVID has been wonderful for both. I can have more Zoom calls. I can meet more people than I ever could before at a higher rate and be more productive. But I can also retreat and, be a hermit whenever I need to. Mm-hmm. However, as a creative, I am a creative extrovert, and I lose energy if I am not surrounded by people. And so I have recently moved back to Montreal. And so that idea of play that you just described and the way I'm going to be investing my time and energy is going to be around making friends here in Montreal, finding people who are creating impactful businesses, whether they're nonprofit, for-profit, B Corps, or otherwise, and figure out how I can support them locally and in person.
Yeah.
And also to connect with local artisans. So people who are building and like people who are doing things and not thinking. So I spend too much time thinking. I need to be surrounded by people who are doing so that I can figure out how to just help and support them, even if it's not directly tied to impact, and really just get out of my house to do that play. And so I think that's going to be my plan for the new year. So there'll be the podcast that I'll continue doing. It's about making friends that are local and that will have some kind of a physical exchange of energies. And then the third thing that will continue to kind of, or I guess maybe third and a fourth thing now that I'm thinking about it. The third thing would be, the active projects that I have, right? Like I just talked to Climate Neutral, I pitched some ideas. I'm always talking to different people. So there are a number of ideas that are up in the air or seeds that are planted that are growing. Who knows what's going to happen? But like that's always going to be the thing that people know me for. And so those will keep coming or not one day, who knows? And then the fourth thing would be my hot glue thing, which I keep bringing back, even though you hate it.
I don't hate your hot glue.
I just find it so weird of a direction. And I'm sure I'm totally like underestimating the struggles of manufacturing and distributing. But there's something so boringly simple about it. Like, it's so hard to figure out how to be a great artist because there's like a billion paths, but like to build a business and to follow a business model of basically charging a little bit more than you're earning, right? And then figuring out like, if you have distributors, there are like business models designed for that. You have delivered by Facebook. Like it feels like I can buy a course for every single chapter of this thing I need, but no one's teaching me how to be like this weird dinky artist. So I don't know. This hot glue thing is just so fascinating to me because it seems so much more scripted once I figure out the technology part of it.
Having done manufacturing and leapt out of it so quickly, I cannot relate to your desire to want that, but I hope one day my children are using Von Wong environmentally safe hot glue.
I think it's one of those things where like people are telling you like, don't go that way, man. You're like, no, I have to try anyways. And they just like bang your head into the wall. You're like, hey, you're right. Let's you just have to do it anyways. I think that might be what I'm doing.
No, I love everything you're doing. And honestly, you've had a huge impact. I know like your expectations of yourself are so incredibly high. We are our own worst critics, but I would say you definitely are. You've gotten a lot of that Asian blood that our parents did a really good job beating into us. But you have done so much and influenced so many people for the better and made significant impacts, even though it may not be measurable or sometimes visible in the way that you would want it to be. It is there. So I feel like that has to be something that you step back and celebrate from. Like, you got to exercise self-love, dude. That has to be something you celebrate because it's made a dramatic impact, man. So from here on out, I can only say I'm excited to see whatever you do next. And I hope next time you are ready to brainstorm, hop onto the podcast. Let's do this again. I hope once you come up with one of these ideas, come back. Let's talk through it. Not on me judging it, because you're much smarter than I am. More like once you've got one of these things up and going, let's come here and promote it and talk about it. And in the meantime, man, we'll be on the lookout for hot glue.
But wait, yeah. Let's make a bet really quickly here, because you look at me and you're like, oh, Ben, you're always out there doing something crazy and cool, and it's happening at such a rapid rate. When do you think this conversation is going to happen? When I come up to you and I say, hey, I did a next big thing that I'd like to really talk about, because I think it's radically different than what I've been doing this whole time.
I would say in less than 6 months, we'll be back here again.
See, I'm estimating more like a year and a half.
A year and a half.
So, because I think in 6 months, I'm just going to be doing the same thing I've already done. I just do another project, another installation that I would get paid for.
That would still be worth talking about.
but it wouldn't be different. And this is the thing, because you said you keep trying new things that are really, really different. And I'm like, no, I really don't feel like I do anything that different.
It's very different, dude.
Well, we'll see if it's like 6 months or a year and a half, and then we can compare the cards, or we can do it in 6 months and I'll just be like, yeah, or I don't know. We'll see. I'm happy to.
I would love to.
it.
Okay. So if you don't have that idea in the next 6 months, then at least within the next 3 to 6 months, I want to bring you back on to talk about your creative process, because I think that could be its own episode in and of itself. And we didn't even really get into that here. But either way, dude, we'll have plenty to chat about. And I'm going to give you 6 months. That's my $100.
That's your homework for me.
I'm betting $100.
Really happy I'd be really happy if I could have that mission statement in 6 months. I think that would be pretty cool.
Do better than your mission statement.
Yeah. It's the fundamental things that are the hardest. It's like naming something. It's so hard to me. But yeah, I find it just so funny. Like I always get stuck on the dumbest things. And then the things that other people think are really hard are the things that come easily to me. But I guess that's what all makes us unique. So anyways, thanks for having this conversation and indulging me in all the different rants.
I appreciate you, Ben. Appreciate everything that you have been doing, everything that you've done, everything that you will do. And we'll chat soon, brother.
All right. Thank you so much.